The fire was minutes from killing her baby. Then the dog moved. The crib was still. The baby, asleep, and Luna, she was staring at the wall. For days, the German Shepherd had been on edge. She'd sniffed that same corner again and again, whined, Saturday by the nursery without being called. No one paid her much mind until that night. Because that was the night she didn't bark. She acted, and Elena watched, frozen in disbelief, as Luna grabbed her daughter's pajama sleeve and pulled urgently, awkwardly across the floor. Was this what they had feared all along? That Luna would snap? That this dog, trained for war and long retired, would forget where she was? Number? Because 2 minutes later, the fire burst through the wall. What followed was not just a rescue, it was a revelation of instinct, of purpose, and of a past they never asked about until it came roaring back in flame. The cold had settled into Luna's bones long before the sun disappeared behind the hills. Her breath curled in the frosty evening air as she padded across a forest trail, her ears twitching, nostrils flaring. Beside her, Officer Ray Delgado gripped the flashlight tighter, scanning the shadows that moved like ghosts between trees. "Luna," he whispered, barely audible. "Find." "I'm?" She didn't need the command. She was already locked in, nose low, body tense, tail stiff. The girl 8 years old, blonde, wearing a red jacket that had been missing for nearly 6 hours. Temperatures were dropping fast, and every second felt like a countdown against time. Luna pushed forward, weaving between tree trunks, the distant echo of worried voices and helicopter blades long behind her. She wasn't listening for people anymore. She was listening for the silence, those pockets of unnatural stillness where something might be hiding, where a frightened child might be curled up and alone. Ray moved behind her, boots crunching leaves. His face was drawn, eyes haunted by the worst-case scenario. He had been Luna's handler for almost 4 years. Together, they'd found lost hikers, hunted down suspects, even sniffed out hidden narcotics from car engines and airplane cargo holds. But this was different. Luna suddenly stopped. Her entire body went rigid, nose lifting slightly. She sniffed the air, once, twice. Then she bolted. "Luna!" Ray shouted. He ran after her, crashing through low branches and brush, heart pounding. Luna didn't stop. Her paws hammered the dirt path, her chest pulling tight with urgency. And then, she found her. Beneath the hollow trunk of a fallen tree, the red jacket barely visible, a small body curled in on itself, like a leaf caught in the wind. Luna barked, sharp and desperate. She circled the child, sniffing, whining, nudging her gently with her nose. But the girl didn't move. Ray arrived seconds later, skidding to a stop and falling to his knees. He dropped his flashlight, hands trembling. Jesus. His fingers reached for her wrist, searching for a pulse. He let out a shaky breath. There was one, but it was faint, terrifyingly faint. He looked at Luna. She was sitting, ears back, eyes locked on the girl. Her chest heaved. She licked the child's hand softly, almost pleading with her to wake up. "She's alive," Ray said. "Barely." They called for medevac. Rescue teams arrived. The girl was airlifted out within minutes, but the guilt settled in Luna's chest like a stone. She had found Herbert. It was too close to the edge. Back at the staging ground, Ray sat on the tailgate of a pickup truck. Luna lay beside him, head on her paws, eyes dark and distant. Neither of them spoke. Around them, radios buzzed, search teams debriefed, coffee was passed around, but Luna didn't lift her head once. A medic came over. "She's in critical condition," he said quietly. "Hypothermia. If she'd been out there another hour." Ray nodded. His hand found Luna's neck, fingers burying into her thick fur. "We were late," he murmured. "No," the medic said. "She's alive because of you two." But it didn't feel like a rescue. Later that night, when the Bennett Police K9 unit returned to the station, Luna refused to enter her kennel. She paced in the hallway, letting out a low, anxious whine. Her dinner sat untouched in its metal bowl. Ray crouched beside her. "I know," he whispered, pressing his forehead to hers. "I know." Luna closed her eyes, but she didn't sleep. She didn't sleep the next night either. They called it a retirement, but Luna didn't understand words like that. One morning, Officer Ray came into the K9 unit earlier than usual. His uniform was still crisp, but his shoulders slumped with a weight Luna hadn't seen before. He knelt in front of her kennel, eyes misty. She rose to her feet, wagged her tail once attentive. He didn't bring her vest. He didn't reach for the leash. Instead, he unlatched the door and sat on the floor beside her. "There's no more work for you, girl," he whispered. Luna tilted her head. Ray tried to smile, but it faltered. His fingers traced the silver ID tag still clipped to her collar. "Luna, Unit 32. She leaned into his hand, unsure. This wasn't routine. There were no sirens, no truck rumbling to life, no pre-shift commands, just silence and the hollow echo of something ending. "You did good," he said. "More than good. But you've seen enough, felt enough. It's time someone takes care of you now." He buried his face in her neck. Luna licked his ear. She didn't resist when they loaded her into the unmarked van that afternoon. But she looked back once searching for the familiar outline of Ray's shadow. It wasn't there. The shelter for retired working dogs sat at the edge of town, behind a quiet line of pine trees. No barking, no chaos. It wasn't like the city shelter. It was quieter, too quiet. The woman at the front desk, a kind voice named Mel, reached out to pet Luna. Luna flinched. "She's skittish," Mel noted softly to the intake officer. "Didn't expect that from a K9. "She's been through a lot," he replied. "Lost a kid on her last case. Blames herself. Dogs don't know how to process that kind of trauma." Mel knelt to Luna's eye level. "Hey, sweetheart, you're safe here." Luna lowered her head. They gave her a clean pen, a soft cot, a silver bowl of filtered water, a warm blanket folded neatly in the corner. Everything a good dog should want. But Luna didn't touch the blanket. Didn't touch the food either. She sat facing the door for hours, ears tilted toward every sound, hoping no, listening for a voice she recognized. By the third day, they stopped trying to pet her. She didn't bark, didn't growl, just existed. Like a photograph of a dog, rather than the real thing. One staffer joked, "She looked like a statue, carved from sorrow." Another said it wasn't normal how still she was, how she seemed to be waiting for orders that would never come again. At night, Luna paced, from corner to corner, like she was checking perimeter. Old habits. She slept in short bursts always, with one ear up, always ready. Sometimes she'd wake herself up from dreams, let out a muffled whine, shake, then settle back down with a sigh that sounded too human. "She doesn't trust anyone," Mel told the head caretaker one morning. "But it's not fear. It's something else. Like she's lost, but not afraid of being lost, just resigned." The caretaker nodded. "She doesn't belong here. Not really. But there's nowhere else." No one came to visit Luna. The other dogs got visitors, young couples, retirees, families with kids. They'd linger at the glass, coo and smile, tap gently. Luna never approached the front of her pen. She watched from the shadows. When children ran by laughing, she'd lower her gaze. Not because she disliked them, because something deeper ached. A week passed. Then two. Mel brought a new toy one afternoon, a small stuffed bunny with squeakers inside. She rolled it toward Luna gently. The German Shepherd didn't even look at it. Mel sat on the cold concrete floor outside the pen, crossing her legs. "You're grieving," she whispered, as if Luna could understand. "And I get that, but someone's going to come for you. I know it. And when they do, you need to meet them halfway, okay? Just a little." Luna blinked slowly. Her tail didn't move. That night, she dreamed of sirens again, of Ray's voice in the dark. "Luna, find her." The girl's red jacket. The snow. The silence. Luna whimpered in her sleep and curled tighter into herself, as if trying to bury the memory beneath her fur. The next morning, Mel noticed something odd. The bunny had been moved, just slightly nose facing toward the cot. Hope, perhaps. Or instinct. But it was a beginning. The shelter air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old fur. A late autumn sun cast long shafts of gold through the narrow windows as Elena Bennett stepped inside, one hand cradling the gentle curve of her pregnant belly. Her other hand clutched David's fingers, a silent tether between them as they walked through the hallway lined with kennels. David had been hesitant, He still was. "You sure about this?" he whispered. Elena gave a small smile. "You said it yourself, we want our kid to grow up with a protector. A calm one. Loyal. Gentle. This is where they are." He exhaled, but said nothing more. The truth was, the idea hadn't been his. It was hers from a childhood filled with muddy paws and fur-covered couches, memories of a mixed shepherd named Oliver who'd once laid across her chest every time she was sick. Now, with their first child just months away, something in her had stirred again, a need, not just for companionship, but for presence, stability, quiet protection. Mel greeted them with a warm smile. "The Bennetts? That's us," David nodded. "We're looking for, well, not a puppy. Something calmer, older, good with families." Mel's eyes softened. "We've got a few that might be a good fit." She glanced at Elena's stomach. "Congratulations, by the way." Elena smiled. 7 months. We're having a girl. Then I might have just the one to show you." Mel gestured for them to follow. "She's a bit of a mystery. Not aggressive, not jumpy, just withdrawn. Been with us about 3 weeks. David arched a brow. "Withdrawn? She won't come up to the glass. Doesn't bark. But she watches everything. Especially the babies. Even from a distance." They turned the corner, and there 4 kennels down on the left was Luna. She didn't move when they approached. Didn't lift her head. Just sat on her cot, eyes trained forward, ears tilted. Her coat was thick, with streaks of deep black and honey gold. Her gaze wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't inviting either. It was the look of a dog who had known purpose and had it taken away. Elena stepped closer to the glass. "What's her name?" "Luna," Mel replied. "She used to be police. Got retired early. Her handler couldn't keep her medical reasons. She's been grieving ever since." Elena crouched slowly, her hands resting on her knees. "Hi, Luna," she whispered. "You're beautiful." And Luna blinked. No tail wag. No shift forward. But she was listening. David stood just behind, arms crossed but not cold, studying. "Does she interact at all?" "She avoids people mostly. But she watches pregnant women more than anyone else. I've seen her follow baby strollers with her eyes like she's guarding them from afar." Elena let out a breath, one hand instinctively rubbing her belly. "She's been through something. You can feel it." Mel nodded. "She sleeps by the door at night, like she's waiting." There was a long moment of quiet, and then suddenly, gently, Elena's belly jumped. A small thud from the inside. The baby shifted. Elena smiled and gasped. "Oh, she's kicking." At that exact moment, Luna's head tilted. Barely perceptible. But it was there. The slightest movement. Her ears perked. Her nostrils flared. Slowly, very slowly, she stood. Mel blinked. "That's new." "Len." Luna walked forward, each step measured and quiet, as though trying not to break something delicate in the air. She stopped just inches from the glass, her gaze lowering not to Elena's face, but to her stomach. She sat. Not alert, not guarding, just present. David leaned in, his breath catching. Did she just respond to the baby? "She felt the kick," Elena whispered, voice tight. She knew. Inside the womb, the baby kicked again. And again. Luna flinched slightly in recognition. Her head tilted to the right. Her eyes softened. Something in her demeanor previously clouded, with distance shifted. Just barely. But unmistakably. Mel put a hand to her chest. "I've never seen her do that." Elena crouched again, both hands now resting protectively over her belly. "Hey, sweetheart," she murmured, her voice like breath and warmth. "Are you trying to say hi?" Luna didn't bark, didn't wag. But she stayed. For 5 whole minutes. David cleared his throat. "Okay, maybe. This is more than coincidence." Mel smiled. "Would you like to take her to the outdoor run? See how she does outside the kennel?" They nodded. In the fenced grassy enclosure, Luna walked slowly beside Elena, never pulling, never darting. She didn't play, but she didn't retreat either. When Elena sat on the bench to rest, Luna laid down in the grass 3 feet away, facing her. Watching. Always watching. David sat beside his wife, letting silence speak louder than logic. Finally, he said, "She doesn't look like she's trying to connect." "No," Elena agreed. "It's like she already has." He looked at her. "You think she'll be okay with a baby in the house?" "I think," Elena said, her eyes never leaving Luna's, "she's been waiting for one." The car door creaked open, and the first breath of pine-scented mountain air drifted into Luna's nose. She didn't move at first. She simply stared ahead, her amber eyes locked on the small house at the end of the gravel driveway, white porch rails, yellow curtains glowing softly behind the windows, and wind chimes that clinked gently in the breeze like a whisper only she could hear. Elena stepped out of the driver's side and came around with the leash. "It's okay, girl. We're home," she said gently. Home. The word hung in the air, like a question. Luna stepped down slowly, one paw at a time, and stood at attention. Her ears flicked, scanning the surrounding trees, the fence line, the porch steps. Everything unfamiliar. She didn't cower, but she didn't relax either. David emerged from the passenger side, carrying a small tote bowls, a blanket. The stuffed bunny Mel had quietly tucked into the bag before they left the shelter. His grip on the handle was tight, eyes trained on Luna as she sniffed the ground with methodical caution. "She doesn't wag," he murmured to Elena as they walked toward the porch. "Not even once. She doesn't need toenaut yet," Elena replied softly. As they reached the steps, Luna paused. She lifted her head slightly, reading the air again. It was quiet here, safer than the echoes of sirens and cement floors. But that didn't mean safe. She had learned the difference. The front door opened with a gentle creak. Luna entered last. The moment her paws touched the hardwood floor, she froze. Her claws tapped softly as she stood still, eyes sweeping from the entryway to the hallway that opened into a small living room with a brick fireplace and a plush gray sofa. The smell of lavender cleaner lingered in the air. No other animals. No food left out. Just a lived-in silence. "Let her explore," Elena whispered, unclipping the leash. "Don't rush." David hesitated but nodded. Luna moved, like a shadow, silent, slow, deliberate. She circled the living room once, then moved toward the hallway. Her nose skimmed baseboards, her ears tilted back and forth. Her tail remained low, not tucked, but cautious. She reached the nursery first. The room wasn't finished yet. A soft rug sat in the center, still half unrolled. The crib was already assembled, its white bars gleaming beneath a mobile of wooden moons and stars. A folded pink blanket sat on the rocking chair. The air smelled faintly of talcum, and something sweeter hope, maybe. Luna stepped into the room, her head low. She circled the crib once, then twice, then sat in the corner back to the wall, facing the door. "She just posted up like a sentry," David said quietly from behind the door frame. "She's working," Elena replied, tears suddenly stinging her eyes. Later that evening, they placed her bowls in the kitchen. She didn't eat, just drank a few sips of water and returned to her silent post near the nursery. When they brought her bed into the living room, she didn't lie on it. She lay by the fireplace instead, chin on her paws, watching the hallway. David knelt beside her, placing the bunny toy on the floor. "Nothing." He sighed and stood. "She doesn't respond to toys, or treats, or anything." Elena joined him. "She responds to presence, to rhythm. She's not a dog you train anymore. She's a dog you earn." "Oh." David looked at her, then back at Luna. "She's watching us," he said after a moment. "I know." That night, they left the door to the nursery open. Luna never moved. But when Elena woke to use the bathroom sometime after 3 a.m., she glanced down the hallway, and there, by the crib, in the shadows of the doorway, was the silhouette of a dog. Still, quiet, awake, not guarding out of fear, but belonging to something she hadn't yet named. The days that followed moved like slow watercolor quiet, muted, tender in ways the Bennetts hadn't expected. Luna didn't disrupt the rhythm of the house. She became part of it. Morning started with the sound of the kettle whistling, soft radio music drifting from the kitchen, and Luna's paws clicking lightly against the hardwood floor as she made her silent rounds. She never barked, never begged, never sought attention, but she was there in doorways, in shadows, beside the rocking chair in the nurseries, though she'd been living there for years. Her presence wasn't loud. It was grounding. David noticed it first. One morning, as he passed the bathroom, He saw Luna standing quietly just outside the cracked-open nursery door. Her gaze wasn't fixed on anything in particular, but she wasn't distracted either. Her stance was still alert, present. "She's doing patrols," he said to Elena, handing her a cup of tea. Elena, now into her 8th month, had grown heavier with each week, her back aching, ankles swollen. But every time Luna passed her, she slowed down, not out of tiredness, but respect. Awareness. It happened during the 2nd week. Elena had lowered herself carefully onto the nursery floor, sorting through baby clothes. Luna entered the room and paused. Her ears twitched. Her eyes dropped not to Elena's face, but to her stomach. And then the baby kicked. Elena let out a soft gasp. Oh, she's active today. Luna's head tilted slightly. She stepped forward, slow and quiet, and sat exactly 3 feet from Elena. No closer, no further. Her gaze remained fixed on the curve of the belly, and when the baby moved again, Luna flinched. Just a little. "She feels it," Elena whispered. "She feels her." That night, as David lay in bed beside his wife, reading the news on his phone, he asked, "Do you think she remembers what it's like to protect someone?" Elena looked at the foot of their bed, where Luna lay curled, eyes half closed but ears up. "I think," she said slowly, "she never stopped." Luna never tried to get on the couch, never climbed stairs, never pawed at the door to go out. She waited until they offered. But each night, as the shadows grew long and the house settled into stillness, she made her way back to the nursery, where she'd lie near the crib's empty base and rest her head between her paws. Sometimes, when Elena couldn't sleep, she'd sit in the rocking chair and hum lullabies to no one. Luna would lift her head slightly, acknowledging the music, but wouldn't move. She simply listened. The nursery wasn't finished yet, but Luna claimed it anyway. Not with dominance, but with quiet faith, as if she were waiting for someone who hadn't arrived, yet already belonged to her. David watched all of this with cautious admiration. He hadn't been sure about bringing a former K-9 into a house with a baby on the way. He'd read articlestries of aggression, mistrust, unpredictability. But Luna was none of those things. She was just wounded in a way that didn't lash out but withdrew. Still, every now and then, she'd do something that caught him off guard, like the time Elena dropped a ceramic cup and it shattered across the kitchen tile. Luna didn't flinch. She didn't run. She stood up, calmly placed herself between Elena and the mess, and waited. As if the sound had meant danger. As if she was ready. Or the day the neighbors' kids were screaming in the front yard, play fighting with sticks. Luna, who had been lying under the window stood, pressed her nose to the glass and let out a low, brief whine. Just once, enough to signal concern, enough to make David go check. "She reads energy," Elena said. David nodded. "Better than we do." One evening, as a late autumn rainstorm rolled across the hills, Luna stood in the middle of the nursery for a long time. The baby kicked again, rhythmic and strong, and Elena entered quietly with a blanket draped over her shoulders. She sat on the floor beside the dog. "Her name is Isla," Elena said, her voice a thread of breath. "She's going to be stubborn, I can already tell, but kind. I hope you'll stay long enough for her to remember you." Luna didn't move, but her tail, just for a moment, gave a slow, steady wag. The contraction started just after midnight, a quiet, persistent ache that woke Elena from shallow sleep. She didn't panic, not right away. She lay still for a few moments, one hand resting over her belly, waiting for the rhythm to pass. It didn't. By the time she whispered David's name, her voice trembled. "It's time." "Oh." He sat up instantly, eyes wide, heart already racing. "Are you sure?" She nodded once, biting back a breath. "They're regular now." Luna had been asleep at the foot of the bed, her body curled tight, but the shift in Elena's tone made her lift her head. She watched as David grabbed the hospital bag, slipping on shoes with shaky hands. Elena moved slowly toward the door, gripping the wall, breathing like she'd practiced. Luna stood, tail still, gaze locked on Elena's every movement. David opened the door. "Come on, let's go, let's go." "I'll be okay," Elena whispered through gritted teeth. Then glancing at Luna, "Stay, we'll be back." Luna didn't move. She just stood there, framed in the hallway light, ears angled forward, eyes dark and steady. She waited at that door long after the house went quiet. Isla came into the world 17 hours later, wrapped in a chorus of relief and tears and exhausted laughter. The nurses swaddled her in a yellow blanket. Her tiny fists curled into her chin, her cries like a cracked violin loud but delicate. Elena cried harder than she expected. Not from pain anymore, but from something deeper. From the awe of holding something that had lived beneath her ribs and now blinked back at her like a promise. David never left her side. Not once. When they laid Isla in the bassinet, he hovered over her like a man trying to memorize his purpose all over again. "I didn't know love could hurt like this," he whispered. Elena smiled through the haze. "It's supposed to." They stayed for 2 nights, just to be sure. When the nurse finally handed Elena the discharge papers, she clutched them to her chest like something fragile. "She's ready to go home," Elena said. But in her mind, she wondered, is Luna ready to meet her? The moment the car pulled into the driveway, Luna stood from her post by the front door. She hadn't touched her food in nearly 2 days, had barely left the foyer. Melancholy had settled into her like fog, her head resting against the cold wood floor as she waited. Every passing car, every creak of the front gate had made her ears twitch. But she hadn't moved. Not until now. David carried the car seat up the steps, Elena trailing behind, slower now, her limbs heavy with recovery. When the front door opened, Luna didn't rush forward. She didn't bark. She simply stood tall, quiet, watchful. Elena stepped inside first. "We're home," she said softly. Luna's eyes dropped immediately to the bundle in David's arms. The baby, wrapped in pale yellow, breathing soft, fingers like flower petals. Luna's ears twitched. She stepped forward once, then paused, as if asking permission. David hesitated, but Elena nodded. "It's okay, girl." Luna closed the gap between them. She moved slowly, silently, lowering her head toward the car seat without touching it. She sniffed once, deeply. Her nostrils flared, then again, and again. Isla stirred. The infant's hand twitched. Her eyes blinked open briefly, meeting nothing and everything, all at once. Luna sat. Not like a dog begging, like a sentinel returning to her post. That night, after the bottles were cleaned and the cries were soothed, Elena and David finally collapsed into bed, exhausted, overwhelmed, in love in a way that terrified them. Luna stayed behind. When the house fell into silence, she crept toward the nursery. The door was open. The nightlight glowed in the corner, casting soft shapes across the walls. Isla slept in her crib, her breath barely audible beneath the soft hum of the baby monitor. Luna lay down beside the crib. No command, no gesture, no reward. She curled her body against the baseboard, head on paws, her chest rising and falling in perfect rhythm with the little heartbeat above her. And in that stillness, something ancient settled between them. Not instinct, not training, just love. The days blurred in soft repetitions warm bottles, lullabies, and the muted creak of the old rocking chair. Time, in the Bennett house, was no longer measured in hours or minutes, but in diapers changed, naps taken, cries soothed, and small miracles witnessed. And in the middle of it all was Luna. She was never in the way, never asked for attention, and never truly rested. But somehow, she was always there folded into the quiet cadence of the household, like a shadow with purpose. Each morning, as David brewed coffee and Elena warmed a bottle in the early hush of dawn, Luna would stretch silently from her place beside the crib. Her body moved like silk over wood as she followed Elena into the kitchen, eyes sweeping the windows, the hallway, then settling once Isla was in her mother's arms. When David paced the living room with Isla bundled against his chest, whispering silly nonsense into her ear, Luna would trail just behind, never touching, never interfering, just close enough that if anything fell, if anyone stumbled, she would already be moving. They never trained her to do it. They never had to. Some things were instinct. Others were love. By the 3rd month, Luna had learned the rhythm of Isla's cries. The short, impatient whimper for food. The startled squeal of a bad dream. The hiccuping sobs of a bellyache. She responded differently to each. At the first sound, Luna would sit up, alert but still. If it escalated, she'd pace just outside the nursery door, nails tapping softly. But it was only when Isla reached a pitch of real distress that Luna would emit a quiet, urgent whine her signal, her call to arms. Once, when Elena was in the shower and David had gone to take out the trash, Luna stayed posted at the crib. When Isla began to cry a full-body wail, Luna didn't bark. She didn't panic. She simply ran to the bathroom door and let out a sharp, short sound. Elena knew immediately. "She's like a second monitor," she said later, towels still wrapped around her damp hair. But better. Outside, the world was colder now. Winter had crept in with breath like glass, frosting the edges of the windows and painting the trees in dull whites and grays. But inside, the house was warm. Every afternoon, David would take Luna out into the backyard for a walk along the fence line. She no longer hesitated like she had that first week. No more circling, no more retreating to door frames. She walked with quiet confidence now, glancing back only to make sure someone was still there. When Isla was old enough for a stroller ride, Elena bundled her in a puffy pink snowsuit and placed her gently in the seat. Luna walked beside them, always on the left side, always a step behind. "She never pulls," David remarked once. "Even off-leash. It's like she's guarding a convoy." Elena smiled. "Just without the sirens." They passed neighbors sometime, some curious, others cautious. Few could believe Luna had once been a working dog. She was so quiet, so steady, so unlike the high-strung shepherds they expected. But what they didn't see, what only the Bennetts understood, was that Luna wasn't calm because she'd forgotten how to fight. She was calm because she had chosen peace. One night, Elena woke to the sound of soft stirring. Not Isla's cries, just a gentle rustling. She blinked into the low amber glow of the nightlight and saw Luna standing by the crib, head tilted, eyes focused upward. She was watching Isla's tiny hands flutter in her sleep. Elena didn't speak. She just watched. And then something remarkable happened. Luna laid her head against the side of the crib. Not hard, not forcefully, just close enough. A touch, without touching. And Isla, still asleep, let out a little sigh, a sound like comfort, a sound like recognition. That was the first night Elena didn't rock her daughter back to sleep. Luna had already done it. By the end of the 3rd month, Luna was no longer just a presence in the house. She was part of the architecture, part of the rhythm. She rose when the baby stirred. She settled when the baby slept. She positioned herself in quiet places between the rocker and the door, beside the high chair at breakfast, under the crib when the wind howled. They never asked her to do any of it, but she did it anyway, not because it was expected, but because, somewhere deep in that quiet, loyal heart, Luna had chosen her mission. And this time, she wouldn't fail. It started with a reach. Not dramatic, not rehearsed. Just the slow, wobbly movement of a baby's hand stretching towards something soft and familiar. Isla was nearly 5 months old. Her little fists no longer curled like they had in those newborn weeks. Her fingers had begun exploring, seeking the world beyond blanket edges and the curve of her mother's cheek. And what she reached for was Luna. The dog was lying beside the playmat in the living room, her head resting between her paws, eyes half closed but always aware. Isla had been doing tummy time, letting out happy gurgles and spit-laced raspberries, legs kicking with newfound strength. Elena sat on the couch with a cup of lukewarm tea, watching, and then without sound, without prompting, Isla reached. Her hand, unsteady but certain, landed on Luna's ear. Time paused. Elena's breath caught in her throat. She started to rise, lips parting in a whisper. "No, sweetie," gentle. But Luna didn't flinch. She didn't turn her head, didn't pull away. She remained perfectly still, letting the baby's small fingers curl around the edge of her ear, like a leaf hanging from a branch. And then so softly it could have been missed, Luna leaned into it. Not all the way. Not with weight. Just enough. A conscious gesture. A surrender. Elena blinked back sudden tears. Her hand, still wrapped around her mug, trembled slightly. For weeks, they'd watched Luna watch Isla, seen her guard, her stillness, her devotion. But this was different. This wasn't duty. This was trust. Later that afternoon, David came home with takeout and tired eyes. I swear, if I have to listen to one more coworker complain about the printer." He stopped in the doorway. Isla was on her back, on the mat, giggling. Her arms flailed in the air. Luna sat beside her, not lying down this time, but seated tall and calm, eyes soft, tail tapping the floor in slow rhythm. "What's going on here?" David whispered, dropping his keys onto the counter. Elena, who was snapping a photo with her phone, smiled without looking up. "She touched her today." David paused. "Luna?" Elena nodded. "And she let her." He walked over quietly, crouching beside his daughter. Isla reached toward him, squealing with glee, her feet kicking. Luna's gaze shifted to David, acknowledging him, but then returned to the baby. "She leaned into it," Elena added. "She wanted it." David exhaled slowly, like something was settling inside him. Maybe she needed this more than we realized. The days that followed carried a different texture warmer, somehow more alive. Luna no longer hovered from a distance. She still didn't beg for affection, still didn't bark or push, but she began to exist closer. Closer to Isla's crib during naps, closer to Elena when she sang lullabies, closer to David when he paced the floor with Isla in his arms. And as Latiny and instinctual, seemed to sense the change. She began to smile whenever she saw Luna enter a room. A gurgle, a wiggle of limbs, a little squeal of delight. It was the kind of joy that didn't need language. One morning, while Elena folded laundry near the nursery, she caught a glimpse of something that stopped her mid-movement. Luna, lying beside Isla's bouncer, gently nudging one of the hanging toys with her nose, just enough to make it swing. Isla shrieked with delight. Elena covered her mouth with her hand and sat down, overwhelmed. This dog, who had once patrolled alleyways and sniffed out danger in crowded subways, was now teasing a dangling plastic moon to make a baby laugh. And she was good at it. That night, as David dimmed the lights in the nursery, Luna stood beside him, watching as he carefully laid Isla in her crib. "She's getting heavy," he said softly. "She's growing into the life we've made for her," Elena replied from the doorway. Luna remained still as David adjusted the blanket. Then, slowly, she moved closer, pressing her nose gently to the edge of the crib slats. Not a demand, just a check-in, just presence. David reached down and ran his fingers through her fur. "You love her, don't you?" Luna didn't move, but the faint thump of her tail against the floor said everything. By the end of the week, Isla was reaching for Luna every morning. Sometimes it was clumsy grab to the tail or a fistful of fur. But Luna never pulled away, never winced. She simply allowed it, gently adjusting, gently staying. And with each touch, each giggle, each shared second of stillness between a baby who had just begun life and a dog who had nearly given up on it, something mended. Not loudly, not all at once, but deeply and for good. The first rumble was distant low, almost hesitant. The kind of thunder that barely nudges the glass panes but makes the wind shift, makes the air taste like metal. Luna was the first to feel it. She'd been lying in her usual spot outside the nursery, her head resting on crossed paws, eyelids heavy but still half open. She heard it before anyone else. Not the sound itself, but what came with it. The pressure, the static in the air, that faint vibration that only those who've known danger feel in their bones. Outside, the sky began to bruise purple. The trees shivered in the wind. Inside the house, it was quiet. Elena was washing bottles at the kitchen sink, humming under her breath. David was finishing emails on the couch. Isla had just fallen asleep after her evening bottle, a soft, rhythmic breathing rising from the baby monitor. And Luna had disappeared. Elena noticed it first. She passed the hallway with a towel in hand, glanced toward the nursery, and paused. "Luna," she called gently. No answer, just silence. She stepped in slowly. The mobile above the crib twirled lazily in the air-conditioned breeze. The nightlight glowed faint amber. Isla, wrapped in her swaddle, lay still in sleep, but something felt off. Then she saw the tail, barely visible beneath the crib, tucked tight, quivering. Elena crouched slowly, heart tugging as she peered underneath. There, wedged against the wall, Luna was curled into her self-shoulders, hunched, paws drawn tight to her chest, eyes wide and glassy, with something that had no name in this house but once had a uniform. "Hey," Elena whispered. Luna didn't respond. Not really. Her eyes darted, her breathing shallow and uneven. The second rumble cracked through the air like a whip. And that time, Luna flinched. Elena dropped the towel and lowered herself all the way to the floor. "Sweetheart, no one's gonna hurt you. Not here." The wind howled through the eaves. A sudden crack of lightning lit the nursery for a split second, just enough for Elena to see the tremble in Luna's chest, the tightness in her jaw. It wasn't fear of thunder. It was memory. Whatever storm she saw, it wasn't outside. It was inside her. Elena glanced at Isla still asleep, still safe. Then she crawled over to the edge of the crib, opened the storage drawer, and pulled out a folded baby blanket. Soft, worn, pale blue with tiny embroidered stars. She returned to Luna and gently draped it over her back. Not tightly, just enough. Luna blinked. A slow, tired blink that wasn't permission, but not resistance either. Elena lay down beside her, her hand reaching forward to rest lightly on the thick fur at Luna's neck. "I don't know what happened out there," she whispered, "but I know you came back with pieces missing." Another rumble, another flinch. Elena moved closer, whispering softer now. "You're not in the field anymore. There are no orders, no danger, just us, just this." Luna let out a breath, a shaky, nearly inaudible sigh, the kind that escapes when a wall cracks but hasn't fallen. "You're safe now," Elena murmured, her cheek against the floor, her fingers still gently tangled in Luna's fur. "You don't have to protect anyone tonight. Let me protect you." For the next few minutes, they stayed like that. Two mothers, really one with a child in her arms, the other with a war behind her ribs, and outside the storm raged. When David peeked in, called by the sound of thunder and the silence that followed, he stopped in the doorway. His wife was curled on the floor, whispering gently to a dog wrapped in a baby's blanket. Isla stirred softly in the crib, but didn't cry, and Luna, though still tucked in tight, had begun to breathe more evenly. Her body, no longer rigid, had shifted toward Elena just enough that her head now rested beside the woman's knee. David didn't say a word. He just stepped back and closed the door partway, the warmth of that scene etched into him like a photograph. Later that night, long after the storm had passed and the house fell into its usual hush, Luna emerged from beneath the crib. She walked with slow steps into the hallway, then into the living room where Elena now lay sleeping on the couch, an old blanket draped over her legs. Luna stopped beside her, and for the first time in this house-a-knot for protection, not for duty, laid her head gently on Elena's knee, just once. Then returned to the nursery, climbed back to her spot on the rug beside the crib, and slept without twitching. And that night, she didn't dream of sirens. She only dreamed of soft stars, baby breaths, and a blanket that smelled like home. It was the kind of evening most people forget. The kind that slips between the pages of calendar soon eventful, quiet, unremarkable in the eyes of the world. But in the Bennett household, it was the kind of evening that stitched a family together. The lights in the kitchen glowed warm against the softening dusk. Outside, the trees stood still, their leaves caught in that breathless moment between wind gusts. Inside, plates clinked gently. Laughter danced like dust in the golden light. Elena had made pasta, again nothing fancy. Just something quick she could stir with one hand while balancing Isla on her hip. David had come home late, briefcase still swinging, tie loosened, muttering about another pointless meeting. And Luna. Luna had taken her usual place by the fireplace, not too close, not too far. Just enough to watch. Her body was relaxed, but her eyes, half closed still, tracked every movement. The baby squealed, arms flailing as Elena bounced her gently, then sat her into the high chair. A tiny spoonful of mashed carrots missed its mark, smearing across Isla's cheek like war paint. David chuckled, slumping into his chair. "Your daughter's got worse aim than the interns." Elena didn't look up. "Maybe she's trying to tell you how she feels about your quarterly reports." "I feel the same way," he mumbled, shoveling a forkful of noodles into his mouth. Luna shifted slightly on the rug, the fire casting flickering shadows across her fur. Her ears twitched at the sound of Isla's laughter, bright, unfiltered, free. Elena was playing peekaboo behind the spoon again, her voice rising in exaggerated gasps. "Where's Mama? Where's Mama?" She ducked behind a napkin, then popped back into view. "There she is!" Isla giggled so hard she hiccuped. David looked over his glass of water, shaking his head with a tired grin. How does she still find that funny every time? "Because it's not about the surprise," Elena said, turning toward him. "It's about the return." She wiped Isla's chin gently, her voice soft. "It's about knowing someone always comes back." Luna's gaze lingered on Elena for a second longer, then drifted toward the baby. And for just a moment, something in her body softened, a subtle shift barely visible but present. Her paws stretched out in front of her, her chin rested gently on them. The flicker of the fire made her eyes look almost amber. This was the new battlefield. No gunfire, no commands. Just dinner, laughter, and the scent of roasted garlic. And somehow, it felt just as tense. David leaned back in his chair. "I miss days when we had food delivered. Now everything smells like carrots and guilt." Elena raised an eyebrow. "Oh, I'm sorry. Did you not enjoy the handcrafted artisan meal your wife made after working and keeping a human alive all day?" He grinned sheepishly. "I mean, the carrots were exceptional." Luna let out a soft exhale. Not quite a sigh, more like the quiet letting go of something invisible. Her tail thumped once, barely lifting from the ground. No one noticed. Except Isla. The baby turned her head sharply, locking eyes with Luna. And in that instant, the room quieted not literally, but in some unseen way. The kind of stillness that happens in churches or hospitals or memories. Elena saw it too, that unblinking exchange, that silent language, and for a heartbeat she said nothing. Then, "Do you want to give Luna a carrot, sweetheart?" She dipped the spoon again, then leaned over and dropped a tiny dollop onto a small plate near the fireplace. Luna didn't move, didn't rush. She waited. And when Elena stepped back to her seat, Luna approached with slow, deliberate steps. She sniffed once, twice, then licked the carrot off the plate, turned around, and lay back down. Tail to the fire, face toward the child. David glanced at her. "She still doesn't bark, huh?" "Not once," Elena said. "Not a sound. Do you think she knows she's retired?" Elena hesitated, watching Luna with a trace of something unsaid. "I think she's waiting to know if this place is permanent." And the night ended the way most nights did. Dishes were washed, toys picked up. Isla changed into her tiny pajamas covered in clouds. David kissed Elena's temple as she carried their daughter up the stairs. Luna followed, of course. She always did. She stopped at the nursery door, watched Elena place Isla in the crib, and settled down outside, like a sentry guarding the gates of a kingdom built from lullabies and soft lamplight. Downstairs, the fire dimmed. Upstairs, breathing slowed. And on the rug outside the nursery, Luna finally closed her eyes. But before sleep took her, her ears twitched one more time toward the crib, toward the sound of a baby exhaling into dreams. And her tail moved. Once, as if to say, "I'm still here." The world was silent. Not just quiet, but silent in that eerie, breath-holding way that comes just before something breaks. Outside the Bennett house, the wind had died. The trees, which usually murmured like sleeping giants, stood still and strained. No crickets, no rustle, not even the hum of a passing car. Inside, the clock in the hallway ticked its lonely rhythm. It was well past midnight. Elena was curled against David, her breathing deep and even. The baby monitor gave off a soft blue glow beside the bed, flickering every now and then, like it had a heartbeat of its own. Isla slept in the nursery, wrapped in the warmth of stars and storybooks and her mother's scent, and Luna was awake, eyes open, still, listening. She hadn't moved in over an hour, but her ears had. Flicking, tilting, honing. Something had shifted. It wasn't sound, at least, not one humans would register. It wasn't sight, either. The house looked the same. Shadows in their familiar places, nightlight casting the nursery in gold. It was the air. A dryness. Sharp. Chemical. Wrong. She stood slowly, paws silent against the hardwood. Her breath came low and steady. Her nose twitched. Once. Again. There it was. That scent. It lived somewhere between smoke and plastic. Not yet strong, but real and dangerous. Luna turned her head toward the window. The moonlight poured in through the sheer curtains, painting the walls in cold silver. She took a step forward, tail straight behind her. Then, another. Her body was tense but not afraid, alert, ready. A gust of wind pushed against the side of the house. Then, it was gone again. But it had carried something. A whisper, a warning, a smell too faint for most. Her training came back like muscle memory. Embedded, instinctual. Scan the perimeter, check exits, locate the child. She padded through the hallway, her nails clicking softly on the wood. When she passed the parents' room, she paused, glanced in, saw the steady rise and fall of blankets. Safe, next Isla. She nosed open the nursery door. The baby was in her crib, arms sprawled in that helpless, beautiful way only babies sleep. One foot had escaped the blanket. Luna gently nudged it back inside, then stood still. There, again, that smell, stronger now. The baby stirred. Luna didn't move. Not even as a tiny hand reached through the crib bars and brushed against her snout. Her eyes never left the door. Downstairs, a soft creak echoed, the kind that could be the house shifting or something else. She descended step by step, body low, like a shadow stitched from muscle and caution. When she reached the bottom, she paused at the edge of the living room. The fire was out, but the coals still glowed. The last log cracked softly, collapsing in on itself. The scent was clearer now. Burning wire. Not wood, not food. Synthetic. Electrical. Luna approached the wall where the baby monitor base was plugged in. Her nose flared. That was it. Something was off. Hot plastic. A thin wisp of dark smoke curled from the outlet, nearly invisible in the dim light. She stared. Listened. The silence tightened. She looked toward the hallway, toward the basement door. Closed. But something behind it hummed. The old breaker panel. She backed 2 pairs, pricked, tail stiff, legs braced. Then she turned, raced upstairs, faster than she ever had since retirement. Her claws slipped once on the hardwood, but she didn't stop. Not until she was at the Bennett's bedroom. She barked, sharp, urgent, once, then again. David jolted awake. What the? Elena sat up. Luna? Another bark. Then she ran toward the nursery. Elena was already out of bed, following. What is it, girl? When she reached the hallway, she saw it too. Smoke, thin but real, creeping like fingers beneath the nursery door. Elena! David's voice was sharp now. Grab the baby! She didn't hesitate. Threw open the nursery door, scooped Isla into her arms, eyes wide. The smell hit them fully now. David ran for the stairs. We need to get out, something's burning. Luna stood at the top of the steps, blocking the way. She growled low and pointed. What's she doing? Elena gasped. But Luna didn't move, just stared at them, then darted down the opposite hallway toward the guest room window, toward the old fire escape David hadn't touched since they moved in. Elena understood. She wants us to follow. They did. The night air hit like a slap sharp and full of panic. Smoke curled up from the back of the house, where the circuit box was tucked in a crawl space near the dryer. Somewhere, something had caught. The neighbors' lights were still off. No one else had noticed. Only Luna. They stood in the yard, Elena clutching Isla close, David dialing emergency services with shaking fingers. And Luna? She sat at Elena's feet, still watching the house, still listening, still waiting for the danger to speak again. The house had gone quiet again. The kind of quiet that settles not after relief, but after fatigue, where the adrenaline fades and leaves a strange hum in its place. The Bennetts had returned to sleep, or something like it. The fire department had checked everything. Faulty wiring near the old fuse box. Minimal damage. They were lucky. The smell still lingered faintly in the walls like a memory no one wanted to recall. But Luna didn't sleep. Not deeply. Not yet. She lay on the hallway floor just outside the nursery, eyes half closed but never truly resting. The baby had been settled back into her crib hours ago. Elena had kissed Isla's forehead 5 times like she always did after a scare and lingered a little longer than usual. hand pressed to the tiny chest as it rose and fell in fragile rhythm. David had paced, checked every plug, unplugged most of them. Then silence. Then darkness. Then stillness. Except Luna. Something still wasn't right. She didn't know what, only that it wasn't over. It started with the pacing. At first, slow and soft 4 steps down the hallway. Pause, turn, 4 steps back. Her nails clicked faintly against the floorboards. Not enough to wake the humans, but enough to echo in her chest. The air had changed again. Not sharp, like before. Not burning. Something else. Still, thick, like the world was waiting. She stopped in front of the nursery door, tilted her head, listened. The baby monitor across the hall was silent. No crying, no rustling, just that soft blue pulse of light again. But Luna smelled something. A shift in the baby's scent. Not danger. Not yet. But different. Her nose dropped to the base of the door. She sniffed once, then again. Her ears pricked. Her breathing changed. She let out a sound. Not a bark. Not a growl. A whine. Small. Barely audible. Almost like a question. No one answered. She sat down. Waited. Tilted her head again. Eyes narrowing. Then stood. Whined again. Longer this time. Pitched, like worry. Still no response. Elena stirred behind the bedroom door, but didn't wake. David muttered something in his sleep and rolled over. Luna pressed her nose under the crack of the nursery door. She could hear Isla's breathing. It was soft, but irregular. Not distressed, but different. She pawed once, lightly, at the bottom of the door, then stepped back. Another whine. This time, louder, urgent, still nothing. She turned toward the master bedroom, paced that way, paused, then back to the nursery. Her breathing picked up. The air was too still. Isla hadn't moved in too long. Luna barked, once, short, controlled, then whined, again drawn out now, pleading. The hallway swallowed the sound. The baby monitor's blue glow blinked, blinked, stopped. Just for a second, then resumed. Inside the nursery, Isla stirred. A soft hiccup, a shift, a thump of her foot against the side of the crib, but still no cries. Luna barked again, sharper this time. She scratched at the door with her paw. Not hard, but persistent. Inside, the crib creaked. Elena's voice came faintly from the bedroom. "Did you hear something?" David grunted. "Probably just Luna. She's still anxious from earlier." Another whine. Almost a sob now. Elena sat up. "That didn't sound normal." "I'll check." David mumbled but didn't move. Luna sat down, eyes wide, ears pinned slightly back. The hallway light remained off. The digital clock near the kitchen glowed 3:13 a.m. Then finally the master bedroom door creaked. Footsteps. Tired. Heavy. David stepped into the hallway, rubbing his eyes. "What is it, girl?" Luna stood. She turned toward the nursery, back toward him, then whined again. More desperate now, he frowned. Okay. He opened the nursery door. What hit him wasn't sound, but smell. A sweetness. Sickly. And wrong. Baby formula. Number. He crossed the room, bent over the crib and froze. Isla was awake. But not crying. Her tiny face was red. Not flushed. Strained. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. David's heart stopped for a moment. "Elena," he shouted. "Something's wrong." Elena came running, eyes wide with sleep and terror. She scooped Isla into her arms as David hit the hallway light. Then they saw it. The baby monitor in the corner smoking slightly from the back. The faintest burn mark near the plug. A spark, just like earlier. The internal battery had leaked. The air had turned heavy, and the heat had built. Right near the crib, Elena cradled Isla, patting her back. The baby coughed then, let out a cry that cut through the house like a blade. Not loud, but alive. Alive. Luna stood in the doorway, silent now, watching. The firemen were gone. The outlet had been sealed. The nursery repainted. The baby monitor replaced. Everything back to normal. But not for Luna. She didn't sleep much anymore, not at night. Not with Isla in that room. It wasn't fear, it was knowing. And the knowing didn't go away even when everything looked fine. That night, the air was too still again. The wind outside had died, yet the trees creaked like bones shifting. The furnace clicked but didn't hum. Luna lay just beyond the nursery door, motionless, alert. She had stopped pacing, stopped whining. Now she listened. Something wasn't right. Not the kind of wrong humans could measure in smoke or voltage, but something. And this time, she didn't wait for them. The nursery door had always been her boundary. An invisible line the Bennetts never had to teach her. Luna simply never crossed it uninvited. She had watched Isla sleep from the threshold for months. Saturday, silently during feedings, pressed her body low to the ground when Elena sang lullabies. Always near but never inside. Tonight, that rule broke. Not with violence, but with purpose. At 2:43 a.m., Luna stood, placed one paw against the door, pressed. It gave way with a soft creak, and she stepped in. No hesitation. Moonlight poured in through the half-cracked window. It cast Isla's crib in silver blue, her tiny form rising and falling with sleep. Luna approached slowly, ears pricked. The room smelled faintly of new paint and powder, but underneath, something else. A chemical tang. Bitter. Not smoke, but wrong. She reached the side of the crib, looked down, listened. Isla stirred in her sleep. Her fingers curled toward her own chest. Her breath came fast, too fast. Luna pressed her nose between the crib slats. Sniffed, once, then again. And then she nudged the blanket, gently, purposefully. Her nose worked under the folds. She began to tug, not sharply, just enough. The fabric slid. Isla shifted but didn't wake. Another tug, another breath. And then softly, silently Luna pulled the blanket over the edge of the crib. Isla moved with it, not all at once, just a tilt, then a roll, then a thud, onto the rug, no cries. Just a soft puff of breath as the baby landed on her side, cushioned by the thick wool. Luna moved immediately, positioning herself between the crib and the child. She nudged Isla's cheek with her nose. The baby stirred, coughed, then opened her eyes. Luna lay down beside her, close, but not touching. Just watching. Protecting. In the master bedroom, Elena stirred, her brow furrowed. A feeling, not a sound. Not yet. She sat up, blinking into the dark. David snored beside her. She listened. Then a click, not loud, but distinct. The monitor light blinked, and something inside her said, "Go check." When Elena stepped into the nursery, her heart stopped. The crib was empty. Isla was gone. She gasped, but before panic could rise, her eyes fell to the floor. And there, bathed in moonlight, was her daughter, curled on the rug, breathing evenly. And beside her, like a sentinel carved from the dark Luna, eyes open, chest still, watching. Elena fell to her knees. "Oh my God," she whispered, scooping Isla up. The baby whimpered softly, still half asleep, warm and safe. Elena pressed her close, then turned to Luna. "What did you do?" she breathed. But her voice wasn't angry. It cracked with awe. The crib's corner had begun to splinter. A hairline crack from base to support beam, invisible unless you knelt beside it, which she now did. "David," she called, stunned. "The crib!" He appeared in the doorway, eyes squinting, hair wild. "What? What's wrong?" "Look." He followed her gaze, bent, ran his hand along the edge, then stopped. The screw beneath the mattress had come loose. The base was tilting inward. One more roll, one more night, and Isla might have slid straight between wood and slat. He looked at Luna, who looked back, then down at the blanket she had dragged. Still pooled like a cradle on the rug, David exhaled slowly. "Did she pull her out?" Elena nodded. "I think she knew." Luna didn't move. She didn't need to. She had broken the rule. And she'd do it again. Because the rules didn't matter when it came to that child. She'd crossed the line to save her. And no wanna-know door, no boundary, no crib could stop her again. The wind had picked up again. Outside, Dry leaves scraped across the windowsill like brittle fingers. The old sycamore in the backyard groaned under its own weight. Inside the nursery, it was quiet, except for the shallow, rhythmic breaths of the child curled on the rug, and the soft, deliberate sounds of movement pads against wood, claws carefully dulled by instinct. Luna stood over Isla, rigid yet focused. The air was wrong again. She didn't understand blueprints or structural integrity, but something deep in her spine told her this house was sick. Something underneath was shifting, and it would not wait until morning. She looked toward the door, then back to the baby. She had moved Isla out of the crib once. Now she would take her farther, not to defy, but to protect. Luna lowered her head. She nudged Isla gently, testing. The baby stirred, half conscious, her small fists curling near her chin. Luna stepped around her slowly like circling prey, but with reverence. She lowered herself to the rug, her nose close to Isla's side. Then, with immense care, she reached forward, not to bite, to gather. She caught the edge of the soft blanket still swaddled loosely around Isla's midsection. Her jaws clamped down fabric only, no skin, not even a breath's distance from it. Her grip was firm, but reverent, the kind of hold reserved for something breakable. Then, she began to pull. It was not elegant. The child's weight dragged heavily, anchoring Luna with each step. She paused often, repositioning her feet, adjusting her angle. Every tug required strength and caution. Every inch mattered. The rug bunched. Her nails scraped slightly against the floorboards. Her shoulders shook from restraint, but she didn't let go. She couldn't. Isla made a small murmur. Almost a sigh hand shifted within the blanket. Her cheek brushed the floor. Luna stopped, waited, watched, then continued, her eyes wide, gleaming in the half-light. Not with fear, but a kind of holy urgency. Something primal had taken over. But this wasn't war. This was rescue. By the time they reached the hallway, the house had begun to speak again. Not in words, but creaks, groans, the faint sound of settling. Except it wasn't settling. It was warning. A pipe popped in the wall behind them, sharp and echoing. Luna flinched but didn't abandon her task. She rounded the corner toward the master bedroom. Isla bumped against the doorway frame. Luna paused, readjusted, tugged again, and with each slow, stuttering haul, the impossible happened. Isla remained asleep. Her trust ran deeper than understanding. She simply let it happen, as if her small body recognized the scent, the warmth, the rhythm of Luna's breath, as if this was just another kind of cradle. The monitor light blinked red. Not green, not yellow, red. David's eyes opened first. He blinked, groggy, disoriented. "Elena," he mumbled, "what's that sound?" She was already sitting up, listening. Then she gasped. Not fear, something else. Like the air had spoken her name. They both bolted from bed. David was first to the door, but Elena saw it first. Right there, in the hallway, a vision impossible to explain. Luna, dragging their child, not with teeth bared, not with violence, but with care that defied logic. "Jesus Christ, Luna!" David cried out, stepping forward, but Elena caught his arm. "Wait!" He froze, eyes wide. Isla shifted in the blanket. Her hand flopped free and landed softly on Luna's shoulder. Still no cries, no screams, just breathing. Stillness. Elena knelt. Her voice cracked. "She's not hurting her," she whispered. "She's saving her." David's jaw clenched. He looked again, really looked, and for the first time, he saw what Luna carried wasn't just their daughter. It was a truth, a warning. He stepped aside. Let the shepherd pass. Luna crossed into their bedroom and stopped near the foot of the bed. She dropped the blanket gently, then turned around and stood between Isla and the door, guarding, as if the danger hadn't passed, as if this was just the beginning. Elena knelt again, scooped Isla up into her arms. The baby blinked awake at last. No panic, just confusion. A soft coo. Then her tiny hand reached back, searching blindly in the air, for the only creature who had moved heaven and hallway to bring her here. And Luna leaned in, let the small hand press against her jaw, let the warmth settle into her fur, let the room fall into silence once more. Down the hall, A floorboard groaned loudly. Something gave. A distant, crack-like splintering bone. David went pale. He turned toward the nursery, then ran. The baby monitor crackled, a low burst of static, almost imperceptible. Then silence, then again a soft sound. Not a cry, not a wail, but a rustle. Elena stirred first, her body moving before her mind caught up. Her eyes, heavy with sleep, blinked toward the red light on the nightstand. Still on, still receiving. Another crackle. Then, the unmistakable scrape of claws on wood. Her breath caught. She sat up straighter, her heart ticking faster with a dread she couldn't name yet. "Elena?" David's voice was hoarse, still buried in fog. "What's going on?" She didn't answer, because now she saw it. Movement. In the monitor's grainy screen-low light, infrared blur but undeniable. Luna, dragging something. No someone, wrapped in a pale blanket. Isla. Elena's blood froze. David jolted upright, the monitor now cradled in his palm. He stared, in disbelief. "Is that?" he began, then stopped himself. It was Luna, dragging Isla across the nursery floor. Not roughly, not violently, but deliberately. His instincts screamed. He tossed the blanket aside and bolted out of bed. Elena followed, her feet barely touching the floor as they tore down the hallway. The house was still, unnervingly so. But the dread had a sound now, like something building just out of reach. At the mouth of the hallway, David skidded to a stop. Elena crashed into him from behind, breathless. Then they both saw it. Luna, her dark shape gliding across the floor, her teeth gripping the baby's blanket with surgical precision. Not a scratch, not a whimper, just motion, just intent. The baby's head lolled gently to one side. Her small hand rested on the back of Luna's neck, fingers curled into fur as if by instinct. Elena gasped, but not from fear, from awe. "She's not hurting her," she whispered. "She's protecting her." David's chest rose and fell in silence. His muscles wanted to move to intervene, to snatch Isla up and recoil from whatever this was, but something rooted him. He watched, and that changed everything. Luna reached the edge of the hallway and paused. She turned her head, just slightly eyes, meeting David's presence. And in that gaze was no guilt, no panic, only a single, ancient message. "Follow me, or lose everything." Then she turned, pulling Isla gently into the master bedroom. David finally broke from his trance, stumbling forward. "Luna," he called, half a whisper, half a plea. No response. Elena was already ahead of him, barefoot, breath caught in her throat, following the trail of rumpled blanket threads across the floor. They rounded the corner and stopped again. Luna had placed Isla near the bed. Not dropped, not tossed, placed. The baby wriggled a little but did not cry. Then Luna positioned herself between Isla and the doorway as though whatever was coming would have to go through her first. "I don't understand," David muttered, his voice cracking. But Elena did. She knelt slowly, reaching out to scoop Isla into her arms. "She's warning us," she whispered. David looked at her, still bewildered. "That doesn't make sense." And then, crack. The sound ripped through the house like a snapped bone. A low moan of strain followed, as if the walls themselves were bracing. Then silence. Then bang. A louder crack. Elena's head jerked toward the nursery. "Oh my God!" David was already running. They burst through the nursery door together. Or what was left of it. The crib was tilted sideways, one of its legs jammed into a sunken patch of floor. Plastered dust floated in the air. The corner walls, often from weeks of invisible water damage, had finally begun to sag inward. Where Isla had once been laid was now the precise epicenter of collapse. A rotted wooden beam had torn through the ceiling, smashing into the floorboards. Crib slats cracked, wall socket dangling, a pipe gurgling somewhere beneath. David backed up slowly, jaw clenched. Elena pressed a hand to her mouth. If Luna hadn't moved her, if they had waited even one more minute. David turned, stormed back to the bedroom. Luna was still there, still guarding, still watching. And for the first time, David dropped to one knee. Not to command, but to thank. His voice was low, rough with disbelief. "Good girl." Luna's ears twitched, but she didn't move. Her job wasn't done. Not yet. In Elena's arms, Isla shifted, then let out a soft coo. She reached again toward the dark figure standing sentinel by the firelight. Her hand brushed Luna's fur. Luna leaned forward. Their foreheads touched, just for a moment. Then Luna backed away and lay down, eyes open, facing the hallway where the danger had almost come, and where she'd been the first to hear it. "Luna, no!" David's voice cracked through the hallway, louder than it had been in years raw, reflexive, almost primal. "Luna, come back." But the dog didn't slow, didn't flinch, didn't even turn her head. She was already moving low, fast, silent, except for the rhythm of her claws on hardwood. Her entire body coiled with tension, driven by something older than training, older than fear. Elena, clutching Isla against her chest, screamed, "David, she's going outside." The front door hadn't been fully latched after the chaos, just barely cracked, but enough for a nose, enough for an instinct. Luna pushed through with her shoulder, and the door banged open against the wind. Then she vanished into the dark. For a moment, the world paused. Elena stood frozen in the living room, one arm tightening around Isla, the other bracing the wall as the night air rushed in. David stumbled into his shoes, grabbing the flashlight near the coat rack. "I don't understand. What is she doing?" Elena asked, breath shallow. But David had seen it, in the flicker of the hallway light just before Luna disappeared. That pause, that single bark, it wasn't frantic, it wasn't mindless, it was a warning, a declaration. Something's out there. Outside, the wind had picked up, brushing tree branches into frantic whispers overhead. The driveway glistened faintly with runoff from the earlier storm, and the woods beyond were a solid wall of black. David stepped out barefoot, the flashlight beam slicing through the dark. "Luna," he called. No response. Only the faint thud of paws in wet grass. Then silence again. "Damn it, Luna." He took a step off the porch, nearly slipping. He steadied himself, heart pounding. Behind him, Elena stood in the doorway, rocking Isla gently. The baby was quiet, her eyes wide, listening, as if even she could feel it. The shift. Luna's body moved like a blade through the underbrush, sharp, sure, silent. She wasn't running blind. She was following something. The smell hit her first. A stench of smoke, but not from firewood. From wiring, from plastic, from things that should never burn. She knew this scent, not the exact one, but the signature underneath. Like old fear rising from the ground. It lived in her memory, in the way men used to smell just before the shouting began, before the pain. She slowed at the edge of the tree line, muscles taut, ears rotating, scanning. Then movement, barely a flicker, deep in the brush. Not human, not deer, something low, darting. The rustle of a boot? A crouch? A breath held too long? She let out another bark, this one deeper. Not a question, a threat. Back at the house, David heard it. A sharp report from the trees. Not the kind of bark you hear in play. This was the kind you remember. From documentaries, from war films, from body cam footage the media won't show. A dog drawing a line. Between home and harm, he took off down the steps. "David!" Elena called after him. "I'll be right back. Stay inside, lock the door." But he was already gone, already sprinting across the yard, flashlight beam bouncing, shoes forgotten, the cold biting at his ankles. Luna moved deeper into the trees now, weaving between trunks, every muscle tuned to the smallest shift in air, and then she stopped. Ahead, at the edge of a small clearing, stood a figure, low to the ground, moving awkwardly, a gloved hand reaching for something near the earth, a backpack, a canister. She didn't wait. She charged. The man didn't hear her until it was too late. A blur of fur and fury crashed into his side, knocking him off balance. He dropped the canister it rolled and clanked against a rock. He cursed, scrambling backward in the dark, arms flailing. Luna didn't bite. She didn't have to. She barked, just inches from his chest, teeth bared, shoulders squared. Blocking his exit, he reached toward his belt. Something metallic glinted in his hand. But then light. A beam. From the trees. And David's voice raw, urgent. "Back away from her!" The man froze. Luna didn't move. David stumbled into the clearing, chest heaving, flashlight shaking in his grip. "What the hell is going on?" The man said nothing, but his eyes flicked to Luna, to the canister, to the house now visible in the distance through the trees. And then he ran. David gave chase, but it was too late. The man melted into the brush, disappearing like smoke. Luna stayed behind, nose still low, pacing in circles near the discarded object. David caught up, knees weak. "What is this?" he muttered, picking up the canister. A strange chemical smell. Industrial. Marked with numbers and symbols. He didn't recognize any of it. But Luna, she did. Because she didn't look at the canister. She looked at the direction the man had run and growled. Not loud, but deep. Almost a whisper. A promise. Back at the house, Elena cradled Isla in the nursery doorway, staring at the hole in the wall, the cracked beam that would have crushed them both. And in the distance, she heard Luna's bark echo through the trees. It wasn't panic. It wasn't fear. It was a declaration. "I'm still watching. We are not alone." David stood at the edge of the clearing, the metal canister still warm in his hand, heart pounding from the chase. His breath steamed in the cold night air as Luna remained by his side, alert, but motionless now, watching the direction the man had disappeared. Then it hit him. Subtle, but unmistakable, like memory uncoiling in the dark. "Do you smell that?" he said, barely above a whisper. Luna turned her head slightly. She already knew. The scent was drifting slow, crawling through the trees like a warning no one wanted to believe. Smoke. Not the earthy, comforting kind from a fireplace. This was different, sharpened by chemicals, wrapped in heat, and growing. David's flashlight beam shook slightly as he turned back toward the house. Then he saw it, through the gaps in the pines, a faint orange flicker, low, pulsing, alive, from the direction of the kitchen. He didn't think his body just moved. "Luna, go!" And she ran, faster than him, back across the yard, straight for the house. David tore after her, bare feet slicing through wet grass and gravel, lungs burning with every stride. Branches slapped his face. His flashlight slipped from his hand, but he didn't stop, because that glow wasn't contained. It was spreading. At the house, Elena had just pulled Isla's blanket tighter when she saw the reflection. Not through the window, but on the wooden floorboards. A strange shimmer near the edge of the nursery door. She turned her head slowly, and that's when she saw it. Orange light dancing under the crack. Flickering shadows where shadows shouldn't move. Then came the smell. Sharp, wrong, electric. "Elena!" David's voice thundered as he burst through the front door. "Get out! The kitchen fire!" She didn't ask questions. She didn't hesitate. She clutched Isla to her chest, wrapped in the baby blanket Luna had once trembled in, and ran down the hall. But Luna was already there, waiting at the foot of the stairs. Smoke curled lazily up from beneath the kitchen door, as if unsure whether it wanted to announce itself or keep hiding. David reached for the knob and yanked it open. The blast of heat struck him like a slap. Flames licked along the bottom cabinets. The source was unclear, but the stove's digital panel was flickering wildly, blinking codes he couldn't make out. Grease. Maybe wiring. Maybe worse. The smoke alarm hadn't gone off yet, but it would. And by then, it might be too late. "Elena," he shouted, eyes stinging. "Take Islago. I'll grab the extinguisher." But Luna didn't follow her. She stayed, at the threshold between hallway and fire. Body low. Eyes locked on the origin of the blaze. Something in her had remembered. The heat. The smell. The noise before everything falls. She began to tremble. But she didn't move. Not backward. Not this time. David yanked the extinguisher from under the sink and pulled the pin. A violent hiss erupted as he doused the base of the fire. White foam coated the floor. The flames recoiled, but the heat still pulsed. He coughed, eyes watering, heart in his throat. Then Luna barked. Uns, short, urgent. He spun around. She wasn't barking at the fire. She was barking past it. Outside, Elena stood barefoot in the grass. Isla held tightly, tears streaking her cheeks. The baby was crying now not from pain, but from something deeper, something raw. An echo of fear passed down from heartbeat to heartbeat. Then she saw Luna through the hallway, still inside, still watching. David emerged seconds later, soot on his arms, extinguisher trailing foam, the front of his shirt singed. "It's out," he said, "for now." But Luna didn't move. She remained near the doorway, nose twitching, ears rotating slowly. Not relaxed, not satisfied. Almost like she was waiting for something else to start. Like she knew this wasn't over. David crouched beside her. "You okay, girl?" She didn't look at him. She looked toward the broken latch of the back door, where the wind still blew softly, carrying with it the memory of something deliberate. She leaned forward, sniffed once more, then let out a low growl. Not panic, not confusion, recognition. She'd smelled this kind of fire before, in cages, in war. David followed her gaze. The yard beyond the kitchen was undisturbed, but something about the silence there felt too quiet, too intentional. He exhaled shakily, then turned to Luna. "What did you see?" But she didn't answer. She just sat there, shoulders squared, ears up, as if guarding a secret the house wasn't ready to remember. The first hiss was barely audibly a whisper of pressure releasing somewhere deep within the walls. But Luna heard it, and she moved. Not toward the kitchen, not toward the flame, but away. Fast. Head low, muscles coiled. Every step deliberate. Eyes flashing toward the stairs. She knew what came next. She always had. David held Isla tight in his arms. The child now silent, her cheek pressed against his chest, eyes fluttering as if caught between dreams and dread. "Elena," he rasped, voice cracked from smoke. "Get the door now." Elena didn't argue. She didn't pause. She ran. One hand flung the latch. The other threw open the front door. A blast of cold air knifed through the hallway, and with it light, a sharp contrast to the crawling black cloud that now rolled across the ceiling, like something alive and waiting. Luna let out a bark. Once, short, urgent. Then she ran. She bolted through the open door, paws pounding against the wooden porch, leaping the last step like it meant everything. She didn't look back, didn't wait for them. She trusted they would follow. She had to. David turned just as the hallway light blinked once and died. Then came the roar, a low, thunderous groan as the fire breached the cabinets and reached something it shouldn't have. The smoke had grown teeth now, pouring from the kitchen in thick, angry wavescoating the walls, the ceiling, reaching for the nursery, the stairs, the crib. "Go!" Elena screamed, grabbing his hand. Together, they burst through the doorway and into the night. The cold slammed into them like a wall sharp, unrelenting. But they welcomed it. Welcomed the air that didn't choke, the sky that didn't burn. Luna stood in the yard, halfway to the tree line, tail high, ears forward, her breath fogged in the darkness. She turned back to them, then trotted forward again, like a guide who wasn't done yet. Elena stumbled down the steps barefoot, gasping as gravel bit into her soles. David followed, Isla still cradled tight in his arms. They didn't stop, not until they reached the edge of the lawn, not until they felt the heat at their backs. From the clearing, they turned and saw it fully now. The kitchen windows had cracked. A bloom of orange light licked the roof. The fire wasn't just growing, it was consuming. Wood popped, glass shattered. And the home they'd built, the one they'd painted by hand, where Isla had taken her first steps, where Luna had dared to trust again, began to disappear behind waves of smoke and flame. Elena covered her mouth. David stood frozen, chest heaving. And Luna sat, still, silent. Her ears twitching, as if listening to ghosts. For a moment, no one spoke. Only the crackle of fire filled the void. Then, softly, from David's arms, Isla stirred. She turned her face toward Luna, reached one small hand outward, not toward the house, not toward the smoke, but to her, the dog who had pulled her from the edge of memory, the one who had known before they ever did. Elena sank to her knees, the cold seeping through her jeans. Her fingers clutched the grass, like grounding herself to something real. "I didn't hear it," she whispered. "I didn't smell it." David didn't answer. His eyes were locked on the burning kitchen window. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew. If Luna hadn't acted, if she hadn't dragged Isla from that room, hadn't barked, hadn't led them out, they would have slept through the fire. They would have never woken up. And their child? He squeezed Isla tighter, burying his face in her soft hair. Tears rose, not just from fear, but from something deeper. Something like shame. Luna stood again, took one step toward them, then another. No longer running. Not now. Now she approached like something sacred. The air still shimmered with smoke. Ash floated like gray snowflakes in the cold wind. But her eyes were calm. Not joyful, not triumphant, but resolute. As if she'd simply done what needed to be done. As if she remembered. David looked at her, not as a pet, not even as the dog they'd rescued, but as something else. A protector, a survivor, a soul with fire in her past, an instinct in her bones. He dropped to his knees beside Elena and opened his arms. "Come here, girl." Luna hesitated just for a breath, then stepped forward and lay beside Isla, not touching her. Just close enough for the warmth of her fur to reach the baby's bare toes. And for a moment, with the fire behind them and the wind rising, they just sat there. Man, woman, child, dog, shackin', but alive, together. The sound of the sirens came slow at first, like echoes from a distant world, but closer, closer, until they were no longer just sounds, but symbols red and blue flashing against the trees, painting streaks of color across the faces standing in the dark. David didn't move. He stood in the grass, barefoot and trembling. Isla still wrapped in his arms like a final prayer. Elena leaned against him, head on his shoulder, arms around his waist. Her breath came in soft, uneven bursts, as though her lungs hadn't caught up with her reality. Their house, the one with the sunflower door and the scratch marks on the back porch, was no longer a house. It was a silhouette of flame. The kitchen had collapsed inward. The windows burst hours ago. Smoke billowed up in a hungry column, rising into the night like a warning to the stars. Luna didn't look away. She stood a few paces ahead of them, rigid, still, her ears sharp, her body taut with something that lived halfway between instinct and memory. The firelight flickered in her eyes. Orange, then gold, then gone. She did not whine. She did not move to be touched. She simply watched, as if daring the night to try again. A neighbor, Mrs. Carmichael, was the first to arrive. She wore a robe with sunflowers and slippers that dragged in the wet grass. Her hands flew to her mouth when she saw the blaze. "Oh my God, Elena, David, Isla. We're okay," Elena managed to say, voice barely more than air. We got out." The woman looked down and saw Luna, covered in ash, breathing heavy, standing between the family and the fire. "Was it her?" she asked quietly. David nodded. He didn't try to explain, didn't know how to say yes. Our dog broke every rule, broke open the night, and pulled our child out of the arms of fire. So he just said yes. And the woman began to cry. The fire truck screamed up the road. Then another. And a third. Boots hit gravel. Voices shouted commands, hoses uncoiled. Someone asked if there was anyone inside. "No," David answered. "We're all out. Thanks to her." He gestured to Luna. The firefighter looked down at the German shepherd and froze for a moment, as if seeing something ancient in her, something not just canine, but knowing. "She's a good one," he muttered. "Yeah," Elena whispered. "She is." The first water hit the house like a battle cry. Steam roared into the sky. The hiss was angry, like something in the fire didn't want to die. It fought back, but it was too late. The worst had passed. The nursery was gone. The kitchen, swallowed. The living room roof, now only ribs of scorched wood, dripping black into the ash below. But they were alive, and that was not nothing. More neighbors came. Some brought blankets. One man handed over a thermos of tea without saying a word. Another knelt beside Isla and gave her a stuffed bear his daughter had outgrown. It smelled like cinnamon. Isla didn't cry. She clutched the bear to her chest and leaned into her father's collarbone. Silent, safe, alive. Elena crouched beside Luna at last. Their eyes met. Not as pet and owner, but as survivors of the same nightmare. "You knew," she whispered, voice breaking. "You knew." "Oh." She reached out a hand and, for the first time since the fire began, Luna leaned forward, placed her head in Elena's palm, and closed her eyes. A simple surrender, a quiet trust. Not because she needed comfort, but because she offered it. Behind them, a firefighter approached with a clipboard. "We'll have to run an investigation," he said gently. "Early signs point to faulty wiring in the wall behind the stove. Likely sparked when the circuit overloaded. Happened fast." Elena just nodded. She didn't need the details. The house was ash. The why didn't matter as much as the who they still had. Later, as the fire died to embers and the crowd began to thin, David looked up at the first light breaking in the sky. The world hadn't ended. It had changed. And in that change, something sacred had revealed itself. A dog who remembered more than anyone gave her credit for. A child who trusted that dog without ever needing to speak. And a family who now understood just how fragile safety really was. As the last siren faded and dawn turned the horizon to pale gold, Luna finally sat. Still alert, still watchful, but her breathing slowed. Her body eased. Not because she let her guard down, but because for now the danger had passed. The fire had tried to erase them. But they were still here, alive, because of her. The sun was barely lifting itself over the trees when the lead firefighter walked toward them, clipboard in hand, helmet under one arm, soot still clinging to his face like war paint. He moved slowly, respectfully, as if approaching something sacred. And in a way, he was. David tightened his grip around Isla, though the little girl had long since fallen asleep on his shoulder, her breath warm and soft against his neck. Elena stood beside him, blanket wrapped around her frame, eyes red, but dry now. She'd cried her storm. What remained was stillness. Luna sat a few feet in front of them. Her coat, once a deep sable, was now powdered with ash and streaked with streaks of gray. She didn't flinch as the man approachingly turned her head slightly, one ear perked, the other half lowered, watching him with the cautious authority of a sentinel. The firefighter stopped at a respectful distance. He glanced down at his clipboard, then back at the charred skeleton of the house. Smoke still curled up from the eaves. The fire had been put down, but the scars remained. Blackened ribs of wood, melted fixtures, glass, turned to sugar. "We finished the sweep," he began, voice low but clear. "It started in the wall behind the stove. Faulty wiring. Looked like a junction point overheated. Probably shorted and ignited insulation." He paused, letting the words settle in. Once that caught, it would have gone up like dry tinder. Fast. Real fast. Elena's breath caught. David nodded slowly, absorbing it. "So it wasn't anything we did?" "No," the man said. "Not negligence, just bad luck." He glanced back toward the debris. "It would have lit up the whole place in minutes. Honestly, the fact you're standing here," he exhaled hard, "you're lucky. Really lucky." He looked down again, this time not at the clipboard, but at Luna. His voice softened. Or maybe it wasn't luck. Luna blinked. Not quickly, not with fear, but with the quiet steadiness of someone who knew long before the flames, before the smoke, before the first spark. "She smelled it before the detectors picked up anything," Elena murmured, almost to herself. She pulled Isla out of her crib, dragged her to the hallway. "She broke through the nursery door," David added. "She's never done that. Not once." There was awe in his voice. And something else. Guilt. Maybe for having doubted her. The firefighter knelt. He didn't reach to pet her right away. He simply crouched to her level, allowing silence to fill the space between them. "You knew," he said softly, meeting Luna's gaze. Luna didn't wag her tail. She didn't lean in, but her body softened. Just enough. She acknowledged him. That was all. "She's a German Shepherd?" he asked. David nodded. "Rescue. Came from a shelter in Wisconsin. No papers, no history. Just showed up there after someone found her wandering near an old train yard." The man gave a low whistle. "Well, wherever she came from, she brought something with her. Smarts, training maybe, or just a heart. He rose to his feet again, dusting his gloves. Then, turning toward the fire truck, he called out, "Hey, Collins, bring the good girl a blanket." A younger firefighter trotted over, carrying a clean folded wool blanket from the emergency kit. He approached Luna with visible care, slowly lowering the blanket to the grass near her front paws. Then he stepped back. Luna gave it a single sniff, then lowered her body onto it, tucking her legs beneath her. Not quite sleeping, but resting. A soldier between battles. Another neighbor approached a man in pajama pants and a college sweatshirt. "I heard she pulled your baby out," he said, nodding toward Luna. "That true?" David looked at his daughter sleeping in his arms, then back at the stranger. "Yeah, she did. She deserves a medal." Elena smiled, faintly. "She deserves a second chance. And a home." "She already got one," the neighbor replied. "Now she just earned it." Later, when the fire was reduced to steaming coals and the trucks began to pull away, the lead firefighter returned one last time. He handed David a card. "Inspector will follow up in the next few days. You'll want to file insurance paperwork as soon as you're ready." David took it with a numb nod. But before the man turned to go, he knelt one more time beside Luna. Gently, reverently, he reached out and brushed the ash from her ear. "You caught it before we did," he said. "You didn't bark for fun. You didn't panic. You acted." He looked up at David and Elena. "Most dogs bark when they react," yours responded. He stood. Whatever she was trained for, she remembered. When it mattered. The family stood in silence as the last engine rumbled down the road. The early morning birds began to chirp. The wind, finally, began to clear the smoke from the air. Elena reached down and touched Luna's back. A simple graze of fingers through the soot-stained fur. And for the first time since the fire began, Luna exhaled a deep, long breath. Not of relief, but of release. As if saying, "My job is done, for now." It started with a single photo. Grainy, taken hastily on a phone from across the street. But the moment it captured was unmistakable. A smoke-streaked German shepherd sitting tall on a wool blanket, fur dusted in ash, flanked by a mother clutching her child and a man staring back at what was left of their home. The caption beneath read simply, "This dog just saved a baby from a house fire on our block. Hero, M." The post was uploaded at 6:12 a.m. by their neighbor, Meganthe, one with the wind chimes and the hydrangeas that always bloom too early. She hadn't meant for it to go viral, but by the time Elena returned from the hospital for Isla's smoke checkup, the photo had already been shared more than 3,000 times. By noon, it was 50,000. Comments poured in. "This brought me to tears. Give that dog a medal. Someone get this good girl all the treats. We don't deserve dogs. Look at her eye as she knew. My God. She dragged the baby out? What kind of training does she have? Someone adopt this hero right now. Oh wait, she already has her humans." The fire department's social media picked it up next, posting an official thank you with Luna's name spelled in bold. Luna, the German shepherd who alerted a family and saved their infant daughter, is resting comfortably this morning. Our crews say if it weren't for her instincts, this story would have had a very different ending. Lee. The local news called that afternoon, then regional news, then national. Elena turned her phone over on the table and left it face down. She'd stopped counting the notifications after the third hour. The screen kept lighting up like a lighthouse beacon comment, call, tag, message, repeat. Luna didn't seem to notice. Or maybe she did, but chose to ignore it. She lay curled in the corner of the temporary apartment the Red Cross had arranged, nose buried beneath her tail, one ear flicking every now and then when a siren echoed through the city street. Isla had been given a clean bill of health. No burns, no smoke damage. A miracle, they said. The doctors kept using that word. David hadn't stopped saying thank you to Luna all day. But Elena? She watched it all, with a strange mix of pride and unease. At 5:47 p.m., the first reporter showed up outside the hotel. He didn't even knock, just loitered by the parking lot, camera slung low, sunglasses hiding his gaze. The receptionist tipped them off. By 6 p.m., a second news crew pulled up in a white van with a satellite dish. "Are we a sideshow now?" Elena muttered, closing the blinds. David peeked through the peephole. "They're not leaving anytime soon." "I'm not parading her out there," Elena said sharply. She's not a mascot. She turned to look at Luna, still curled in the corner. Still, but watching. Always watching. At 6:30, a knock came this time, softer. Megan, the neighbor, stood outside the door with a grocery bag and a hesitant smile. "I didn't mean for it to blow up like this," she said before Elena could even open the door fully. I was proud of her. Of you all. People need stories like this right now." Elena studied her for a moment, then stepped aside to let her in. Inside, Megan crouched next to Luna with slow, careful hands. "You're the bravest girl I've ever seen," she whispered. Luna blinked slowly. The bag was filled with notes. Handwritten letters from neighbors, strangers, people. Megan had never even met people who'd left them on her porch the minute they found out she knew the family. There were drawings from children stick figures of dogs with capes, flames in the background, big smiley faces with speech bubbles saying, "Woof!" or "I saved you." There were envelopes with gift cards and heartfelt messages. "I was in a fire as a child. No one saved me. I'm so glad your girl did what mine never had. She's more than a pet. She's purpose on 4 legs. If you ever need a place to stay, we have room for all of you. You don't know me, but I work with rescue dogs. What Luna did takes more than training. It takes heart." Later that evening, as the sun dipped low and the hotel lights buzzed faintly overhead, Elena sat on the carpet beside Luna. The world had gotten louder. Cameras, questions, requests for interviews. Someone had even asked if Luna could pose with a medal for a segment. Elena had politely refused, then deleted her social media entirely. "People want a symbol," she murmured, stroking Luna's side. "But you're not a symbol. You're just you. And that's enough." Luna didn't move, but her tail brushed against Elena's leg once. A whisper of agreement. Somewhere outside, a reporter gave up and started packing up his camera. In the hallway, someone else knocked on the wrong door. Inside that quiet room, though, a mother, a father, a child, and a dog sat in silence. And for the first time in 36 hours, it felt like no one needed to run. It didn't happen the night of the fire, or the next day. Not even when the house was declared a total loss, or when Isla's hospital chart came back with clear in every column. It happened 5 days later. The adrenaline had long since bled out of Elena's system by then, replaced by a tightness in her chest that never fully released. She walked, talked, smiled when she had to. She thanked the fire marshals, the Red Cross, the neighbors who brought food. She nodded when strangers told her Luna was a miracle on 4 paws. But inside, something had started to crack quietly, invisibly, like ice underfoot. That morning, she'd found a single boot of Isla's tucked beneath the couch cushion in the hotel room, burned slightly at the toe, still smelling faintly of smoke. She held it for a long time, and then the weight hit her like a wave she hadn't braced for. It began with a tremble in her hands. Then came the silence, the kind of silence that screams. Elena stood in the middle of the temporary apartment, surrounded by borrowed furniture and half-packed donation bags, clutching that little boot as if it were a lifeline to a world she'd nearly lost. She sank to her knees beside the couch and curled forward, pressing her face into Isla's favorite blanket, the one Luna had dragged her onto that night, the one still peppered with dog fur and a singed corner. And then the dam broke. Her body shook with the sobs she had been holding in since the fire alarm never sounded. Since Luna had dragged their daughter out of a nursery, like some spectral guardian from a storybook. Since David had screamed, "Luna, no!" And yet, she had kept going. The sound of her crying was raw, animal. The kind that comes not from grief, but from the ghost of it. Because Isla was still here. But she could not stop thinking of what would have happened if Luna had not been. If they hadn't heard the bark. If David hadn't smelled the smoke. If Luna had waited just 30 seconds longer. 30 seconds. That's all it would have taken to change everything. She folded forward onto the rug, forehead pressed to the floor, shoulders heaving. Her hands trembled over the patch where Luna had paused. That night, the spot where she'd looked back, waited, barked, made them see. Elena didn't even hear Luna approach, but she felt her. A warm nudge touched her elbow. Then another. Not demanding, not insistent, just present. Luna didn't whine, didn't bark. She simply pressed her body beside Elena's, leaned into her ribs with the weight of something ancient and alive and wholly there. Elena turned slowly, face flushed and blotchy, still clutching Isla's boot like it was sacred. "You knew," she gasped through the tears. "You knew." Luna's tail flicked once. She looked up, ears relaxed, eyes soft but unwavering. It wasn't pride in her expression. It wasn't even triumph. It was peace. A dog who had done what she was meant to do. No medals needed, no applause, just this moment, just Elena, just Isla. Elena pulled herself upright and reached for her daughter, who sat blinking from her place on the floor nearby, half tangled in a blanket, thumb in her mouth, hair askew. Isla didn't speak, didn't fuss. She simply toddled toward her mother with sleepy trust and burrowed into her lap. And so Elena sat there on the rug, cradling her child in one arm and resting her other hand against Luna's neck. "I don't think I'll ever stop seeing it," she whispered. "That night, the hallway, the smoke. You dragging her like you already knew what we didn't." Luna licked her knuckles once, slow and careful. A benediction. David came home an hour later with more diapers and a stuffed animal from the donation center. He paused in the doorway. His wife sat cross-legged on the rug, eyes red but calm, baby in one arm, dog curled close on the other side. He didn't ask what happened. He just walked over and sat behind them, folding his arms around both. The three of them formed a silent circle around Luna, who blinked, yawned, and placed her head in Elena's lap like it was always meant to be there. For a long time, no one spoke. The television was off, the world was quiet, and for once, the silence didn't scream, it comforted. Later that night, Elena wrote in her journal something she hadn't done in years. Not for the public, not for reporters, just for her. She wrote, "She broke the rules to save us. She knew before we did, and maybe she wasn't trained for this, or born for this, or bred for greatness. But she loved us enough to act, and that saved my daughter's life." The crib had always been David's line. He'd tolerated Luna in the house barely, allowed her in the backyard, on the porch, in the living room on rainy nights. But the nursery? That space had once been sacred. No dog hair, no muddy paws, no risk. He used to say it with clipped certainty. "She stays out. It's not personnel. It's safe." But fire has a way of rewriting boundaries. And in the aftermath, as their world curled in on itself like charred wallpaper, that line quietly vanished. It began with small moments. He started keeping the door open at night. Then came the folded blanket by the crib. Then the way his eyes lingered longer on Luna each time she passed Isla's room as if he were still trying to understand her. As if he were waiting for her to prove it wasn't a fluke. But she didn't need to. She never barked again in the dark. Never repeated that wild, rule-breaking run. She just resumed her quiet watch close, constant, faithful. And one night, David laid down on the floor next to her. At first, it was an awkward arrangement, this man in old sweats, flat on his back beside a dog he'd once resented, staring at the soft shadows of a sleeping child swaddled in moonlight. Luna didn't shift. She didn't seek affection. She merely glanced once, then rested her head between her paws. That night, David stayed for 15 minutes. The next night, he brought a pillow. By the third, he fell asleep there. Something inside him softened not all at once, but in layers. He stopped brushing her aside with his knee, started waiting at the door when she lagged behind, picked up her water bowl before she tipped it in her excitement, noticed when she limped a little on cold mornings. And one night, while Elena was asleep and Isla breathed softly in her crib, David reached out and placed his hand gently on Luna's neck. The warmth of her body grounded him more than he expected. He exhaled slowly. The room was still, then barely a whisper, as if afraid it might undo something if spoken too loudly. "Thank you." Luna's tail gave a faint thump, just once. But she didn't move. David hadn't grown up with dogs. To him, animals were tools or pets, not guardians. Not family. And yet this animal, this dog who had defied him, defied the house rules, defied instinct that had saved his world. He hadn't known how to reconcile that. So he'd avoided eye contact, stayed busy, took longer showers. But each night, drawn by something quieter than logic, he'd find himself back on that rug beside the crib. And Luna would be there unblinking, unmoved, waiting. She never asked for his trust. She just met it halfway. A week after the fire, David came home from work carrying a new dog bed, not a temporary towel, not a hand-me-down mat, a real bed memory foam with raised sides and soft fleece. He placed it at the foot of Isla's crib. Luna sniffed it, circled once, and lay down without hesitation. No one said anything. But that night, when David entered the nursery, he didn't bring a pillow. He simply sat beside her, leaned back against the wall, and whispered, "You can stay as long as you want." In the quiet glow of the baby monitor, he watched his daughter dream, watched the dog who'd saved her life sleep at her feet, and realized he no longer feared the closeness. What he feared was how close he'd come to never seeing this, to brushing off the signs, to ignoring the whine, to believing arrogantly that he knew better. Sometimes redemption doesn't come with a grand gesture. Sometimes it's in the way a man folds a blanket and lays it beside a dog. Sometimes it's in a whispered "thank you" that no one else hears. Sometimes it's in learning to trust not what you trained, but what you feel. The gates of the K9 unit stood talon-changed. Same paint, same rattle when the lock clicked open, same smell of dry gravel, metal, and memories. Elena had called ahead. She wasn't sure they'd say yes. But when the sergeant on the line heard the name Luna, he went silent for a long breath before saying, "Come, please." Now, as their car eased past the chain-link fence, Luna sat in the back seat, alert but calm. She didn't bark, didn't whine. Her ears twitched at the faint, familiar scents on the wind. Her eyes never left the building. David parked. Elena opened the door, and Luna stepped out like she'd been here yesterday. Inside, everything felt compressed with time. Photos of fallen dogs lined the walls, steel crates, training harnesses worn from years of work, a scent of oil, sweat, and something ghost-like that hung around dogs who had seen things but couldn't speak them. Down the hallway, a door opened, and a man stepped through. He was older now, a limp in his right knee, beard grayer than it had been in the file photos. But the second he locked eyes with Luna, he froze mid-step. His mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came. Luna didn't wait. She walked slowly to him, cautious but certain. Halfway there, her tail gave a low, uncertain wag. Then another. That was all it took. The man fell to his knees. "Luna?" His voice cracked like dry paper. She pressed her head into his chest, and he broke. His name was Officer Cole Ramirez, her first and only handler. They'd served together on 5 active deployments, 3 years in the narcotics division, 2 in crowd control, a year in disaster search and rescue before she was pulled due to budget cuts and reassigned. But no one told him where. They said she was too skittish, he whispered later, wiping his eyes with the sleeve of his uniform. That she froze up, that she couldn't serve anymore, but she wasn't. She wasn't broken. He looked at her, then really looked. She just needed a different mission. Elena didn't interrupt. Neither did David. There was something sacred in the way they sat man and dog. 2 souls that had once been in sync and were now, after all this time, recalibrating. Luna stayed close, resting her chin on his leg. "You saved them, didn't you?" Cole asked softly. His voice cracked again. "You never stopped protecting, even when we weren't there. Even when they told me you were gone." His hand trembled on her fur. "God, I thought you were gone." In a side room, an officer placed a faded photo on the table. Luna, younger and leaner, sitting at perfect attention beside Cole. She hadn't changed much. Maybe a little more gray around the eyes. Maybe the stare was deeper now, like she'd lived 100 lives in between. But the posture, the stillness, the quiet loyalty, intact, unshakable. They stayed for an hour. They let her roam the courtyard, let her sniff the corners where she'd once trained, let her walk the obstacle track. Though she didn't run, it just stepped across it like a pilgrim walking an old path. A few of the younger officers came out to watch. One of them knelt, held out a hand, and Luna touched her nose gently to his palm. "She's still got it," someone whispered. Another officer nodded. She never lost it. Before they left, Cole bent down one more time. His knees cracked slightly as he lowered himself. The way they always did, now reminders of too many years spent in training fields, deployment zones, and hard winters with a dog who never once asked why he kept going. He reached out, fingers trembling slightly, and touched the side of Luna's face. His hand lingered near the scar beneath her right eye, the one she'd earned during that night raid in Kandahar. The one he never told anyone about because it wasn't the kind of story that made headlines. It was just one of the hundreds they shared, buried under sand and silence. "Take care of her," he said to Elena, his voice tight, breaking against something deeper than goodbye. He didn't look up at her. His gaze was locked on Luna, like he was handing over a legacy, not a living creature. "She's not just a dog. She's the kind that remembers everything. The kind that carries it all." "Oh?" His throat bobbed. "She never forgets. Not the smells, not the sounds, not even the faces she only saw once. And she doesn't know how to let it go. It just sits inside her. Quiet. Heavy." He drew in a breath, then added almost to himself, "Even the pain." Elena's eyes shimmered. She knelt beside him, placing her hand gently over Luna's broad shoulder. "We know," she whispered. "She carries us, too." It was such a simple sentence, but it held lifetimes. Because they'd seen Ithal Luna always placed herself between the crib and the door. How she paced before the fire, not frantic, but focused. How she stared out the window long after the house had gone to sleep, like she was guarding something no one else could see. She didn't just live with them. She held them. Every night. Every second. Cole nodded once, eyes brimming but refusing to fall. Then, without another word, he stood slowly, like every bone was suddenly years older than it was minutes ago. They walked together toward the car. Elena held Isla in her arms, wrapped in the soft knit blanket embroidered with the word Guardian. David followed closely behind, quiet, carrying the small bag of Luna's things they'd brought with them. A leash, unused. A collar, faded with time. An old ID tag that no longer beeped against scanners. And Luna, she walked behind them, not lagging, not resisting. Just moving with deliberate, grounded steps. Each paw on the gravel seemed to echo in the stillness of that early afternoon, where even the birds had hushed as if honoring something sacred. When they reached the gate, she stopped. Her body didn't tense. She didn't whine. But her head turned back slow, measured. She looked behind her, back toward the training yard that had molded her. Back toward the kennels where nights were cold but disciplined. Back toward Cole, still standing in the doorway, his arms hanging at his sides like he didn't quite know what to do with them anymore. She didn't look with longing, not even nostalgia. She looked with understanding. The kind of look only dogs like Luna give the ones who have seen both war and cribs, who have walked through fire, both literal and emotional, and still chosen to protect rather than retreat. That single glance carried no regret, just closure. This chapter, this life, had closed. Not in sorrow, but in completion. She'd come full circle, and now it was time to let that part go. Cole raised a hand, palm outward, but didn't call her name. He knew she wouldn't come back. Not now, not again. And she didn't need to. Luna turned and stepped into the car, her movements unhurried, dignified. She didn't jump or scramble. She climbed in with the quiet grace of someone who understood ceremony, understood what it meant to mark an ending with silence. She didn't sit beside Elena or David. She chose the space at Isla's feet. Her body curled lightly into a half circle, the way she always did when she wanted to be near, but not intrusive. Her head rested gently against the toddler's tiny sock-covered toes. And then, almost imperceptibly, she sighed. Long and low, the kind of sigh that comes not from fatigue, but from relief. The kind that says, something inside me can rest now. It was a sound Elena would remember for the rest of her life. Not because it was loud, but because it was final. Like some invisible weight had been lowered to the ground, finally allowed to stop being carried. The car doors shut with soft clicks. Cole stayed in the rear view for a long time, growing smaller as they drove away. But Luna didn't turn back again. Her eyes closed slowly. Not in sleep, not yet, but in something deeper. A gentle uncoiling of vigilance. A momentary peace earned through years of service and silence. David reached over and took Elena's hand. She squeezed once. They didn't speak on the drive home. The baby babbled softly in the back seat, her feet still brushing Luna's fur. Every so often, Luna's ears would twitch at the sound, but she didn't open her eyes, because she didn't need to. She had made her choice. This family, this child, was her new mission now. And there was no turning back. When they reached the driveway, the sun had begun to lean toward late afternoon. Warm light spilled across the lawn, catching the unfinished edges of the newly rebuilt kitchen nook. Elena opened the back door, letting Isla out first. Luna didn't follow immediately. She waited until Isla had taken 2 clumsy steps on the grass, and then stood, slow and deliberate. Her legs, older now, creaked in their joints, but there was still strength in her frame, still fire behind her stride. She stepped out into the sunlight. Elena stood in the doorway, watching her. There was a moment, just a breath, where time seemed to still. A breeze moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a wind chime danced, and Luna raised her head, sniffed the air, and then walked inside. Past the rebuilt kitchen, past the new walls, fresh with paint and hope, past the nursery door, straight to the window nook. She climbed up onto the sun-warmed cushion without hesitation and settled in, facing outward. The view showed the yard, the street, the old maple tree that had stood through the fire and still hadn't let go of its leaves. From that perch, she could see everything. And she did. Even as her eyes drifted shut, her ears remained attuned to every sound, each footstep, each laugh, each sigh in the hall. Because rest was allowed now. But sleep? That was still earned. And Luna? Luna was always on watch. Even when the mission had changed. Even when the past was finally at peace. Even when the gate had closed behind her for the last time. Because for dogs like her, the watch never truly ends. The first envelope came 3 days after the fire, postmarked from a neighboring town. No return address, just one word written in crayon across the back. For Luna. Inside, a folded sheet of construction paper, a crooked heart drawn in purple, and a message scribbled in a child's uneven hand. Thank you for saving the baby. You are a hero. I want a dog like you one day. Love, Naomi, age 7. Elena stood in the kitchen, card trembling in her fingers. Across from her, Luna lay curled near the crib, one ear twitching at the sound of a coo from Isla. She doesn't even know you, Elena whispered, but she already loves you. By the end of the week, the mailbox couldn't hold them all. Cards came daily, envelopes stuffed with stickers and shaky handwriting. Some addressed to the hero dog in the blue house, others simply Guardian. One envelope had a glitter trail that stuck to David's fingers for the rest of the afternoon. Another contained a drawing, Luna with a tiny cape, standing in front of flames, baby and mouth butt smiling. He chuckled softly, eyes stinging. Kids see the truth clearer than adults, he muttered. Then came the box, wrapped in brown paper, tied with string, no note, just a cloth tag pinned to the side that read, "For the one who guarded in the smoke." Inside, a blanket, handmade, heavy with careful stitches. The fabric was soft, thick wool, lined with faded blue flannel, sewn into one corner in gold thread. Luna, Guardian. Elena traced the letters with her thumb. No fanfare, no brand name, just love made visible. They laid it on Luna's favorite spot near the fireplace. She sniffed it once, circled twice, then collapsed with a groan of content that sounded almost human. From then on, she wouldn't sleep anywhere else, even when the heater was running, even when the lights were off and the whole house lay still. That blanket became her post, her badge, her place of peace. In the weeks that followed, more came. A collar from a retired firefighter in Oregon. A medal shaped like a paw print with the words "Loyal Beyond Reason" etched on the back. A photo from a classroom, rows of smiling kids holding up signs that said, "Thank you, Luna." But it wasn't the gifts that changed the house. It was the shift in how people spoke her name. Luna wasn't just the dog anymore. She was the reason they were still here. The memory they could hold on to when the smoke finally cleared. One afternoon, David sat on the porch steps, Luna at his side. He held a letter in one hand, not from a child, but from a veteran support group, a man named Victor, who'd lost his own K-9 partner in a house fire years ago. "What your dog did," it read, "wasn't instinct. It was choice. Dogs like that, they decide what to carry and who to carry it for." "One night!" David folded the paper, eyes misty, then looked at Luna. "You carried us." She didn't move, but her tail thumped once against the blanket, as if to say, "I know." Inside, Elena taped the best cards to the hallway wall. Some were stick figures. Some were smudged with fingerprints. Some had no words, just swirls of color that somehow felt like gratitude. And above them all, at the very center, she pinned the stitched tag from the blanket, "Guardian." The hospital smelled like antiseptic and crayons. Elena tightened her grip on the leash, though she didn't need to. Luna walked close by, silent as breath, her head low, not from fear, but a kind of reverence, as if she knew this place was sacred, in a way fire and smoke never could be. They passed rooms painted in soft pastels, murals of clouds and stars, wheelchairs parked beside IV stands. Nurses whispered kindly and stepped aside. Everyone turned to look at Luna. Some smiled, some stared. One janitor placed a hand to his heart and nodded. By now, her face had been in the paper, on local television, the dog that saved the baby. But Elena wasn't here for the press. She was here because of one letter, one boy, and a quiet hope. Room 214. The door was already open. Inside, a little boy sat near the window, knees pulled to his chest. His name was Caleb, 6 years old, nonverbal since birth. His mother stood beside the bed, tired and wary but curious. She didn't smile, but she didn't stop them either. Elena crouched beside Luna, looked her in the eyes. "Gentle girl, just sit, just be." She slipped the leash off. Luna padded forward, slowly, without a sound. She didn't sniff, didn't lick, didn't wag. She just sat down on the floor next to the boy. Caleb turned his head slightly, one hand tightening on the hem of his shirt. Luna didn't move. Seconds passed, then a minute. The hospital seemed to fade away into silence, into breath, into something that wasn't quite stillness, but something deeper. Elena watched the boy from the threshold, watched how his fingers slowly unfurled. He leaned forward, just an inch. His gaze locked on Luna's eyes, that deep, amber calm. The eyes of something that had seen fear and stayed. Then a sound, so soft it barely made it past his lips. "Dog," his mother gasped, covered her mouth. Tears welled in her eyes, and she dropped to her knees beside the bed. "Caleb, baby? Say it again?" But the boy didn't need to. He was already reaching out. His fingers brushed Luna's fur, tentative at first, then firmer. Luna remained still. Not a twitch, not a flinch, just presence, just warmth. Afterward, Elena sat in the hallway, trying to process what had just happened. A therapist approached her with red eyes. "I've worked with Caleb for 3 years," she said. "He's never said a word." Elena looked down at Luna, curled now at her feet, and whispered, "She doesn't chase miracles. She just sits in the places where they're ready to happen." Word spread fast. By the next week, Luna was invited back. She visited the cancer ward, the burn unit, the trauma wing. Never barking, never demanding. Just offering something few humans knew how to give, presence without expectation. One child placed their tiny hand on her back and fell asleep for the first time in days. Another, shaking with tremors, stilled as soon as Luna laid her head on their foot. There were no commands, no training demonstrations, no tricks, just something ancient, something true. The staff began calling her the listener. The kids called her Nana Dog, like the guardian from Peter Pan. And Elena, she just watched it all unfold with a heart she didn't know could hold this much. There had been a night weeks ago when she thought she'd lost everything. Her child, her home, herself. And now she was standing in a room where a dog had given a child his first word. On the way home, Elena stopped by the lake. The wind was soft, and the sun bent low over the water. She opened the back door of the car. Luna jumped out and walked toward the edge. No leash, no hesitation, just purpose. Elena sat on the bench and whispered, "Whatever they took from you, whoever left you behind, they didn't break you. You found your way back." Luna turned once, glanced over her shoulder, and wagged her tail. It wasn't for approval, it was acknowledgement. A quiet yes. The smell of scorched wood still clung faintly to the frame of the house, like a ghost that hadn't made peace with leaving. Plastic sheets rippled in the wind. A contractor's radio crackled somewhere near the driveway. Sawdust floated in the summer light, dancing like pollen. The house, though wounded, breathed again. Inside, the kitchen was gutted. Bare studs and raw drywall, exposed wiring like veins. But it no longer felt like a place of fear. It felt like a beginning. Luna stepped gingerly across the taped floor, her nose twitching. She paused near the wall that once held the flameeth, one that could have ended it all, then turned away as if she'd already closed that chapter. Elena stood with the contractor, blueprints spread across the breakfast counter that wasn't there anymore. "We'll get your gas lines replaced. New insulation, full fire code upgrades," he said. Most families just want it back how it was. Elena didn't answer at first. She looked down the hallway, where the nursery door was cracked open. A mobile of stars swayed slowly above Isla's crib. "I don't want it exactly how it was," she said finally. "I want something different this time." He raised an eyebrow. "I want a window seat in the nursery," she said. "Just under the east-facing window." He blinked. "A window seat? For the dog?" He chuckled, thinking she was joking. Elena didn't smile. "I'm serious." The next week, the frame went up, wide enough for a full-grown German shepherd to curl comfortably, lined with thick insulation, extra reinforcement. The seat would face the morning sun, the way Luna always did when lying on the porch. David stood beside Elena as they watched the carpenters measure. "You're really doing it," he said. "She earned it." "She did," he agreed quietly. "She really did." There was a pause. Then David added, "Isla's been sleeping better when Luna's near, like she knows she's safe." Elena's hand found his. "Maybe we all do." On the first warm day of August, they let Luna into the nursery. The seat wasn't painted yet, but the wood smelled clean. The window above had been replaced with one that didn't fog or rattle. Sunlight streamed through it like a promise. Luna trotted in behind Elena, sniffed the corners, then turned to the seat. She climbed up slowly, circling once. Then she lay down, facing outward, eyes half closed. "Elena knät bisher." "She's claimed it," she whispered. From the crib, Isla let out a coo and kicked her feet against the mattress. Luna didn't flinch. She wagged her tail and seemed, went still again. Guardian mode, always watching. The kitchen took longer. Cabinets were slow to ship. There was a dispute over tile color. But Elena didn't mind. She filled the house with new things, yes, but also with intention. A fire extinguisher in every room. Smoke detectors with sealed 10-year batteries. A copy of Luna's photo on the fridge. Taken just days after the fire, her muzzle still smudged with soot, her eyes calm as always. They painted the walls a soft gray. David called it Ash Reborn. Elena liked that. One afternoon, while the painters worked upstairs, Elena sat on the back porch, legs tucked beneath her. Luna lay at her feet, eyes scanning the yard. "Do you remember that night?" Elena asked softly. "When you ran and we just followed?" Luna didn't look at her, but her ears twitched. Elena smiled. "You knew before any of us. I don't know how. But you did." The wind rustled the leaves. Birds called lazily from the fence post. "I think the fire didn't just take things away," Elena continued. "It cleared something. It showed us what matters. Who matters?" Luna looked at her now. Really looked. There was no need for words. When the rebuild was complete, they held no ceremony, no ribbon cutting, no announcement. But that first dinner standing around a new island, forks in hand, Isla giggling in her high chair, that was the celebration. Luna lay at the threshold of the kitchen, not begging, not restless, just home. It started like most Kiat mornings. The sun hadn't fully broken through the clouds yet, but the nursery was already filling with that soft, golden light, the kind that stretches shadows gently across the floor without waking them. Elena stood barefoot by the window, sipping from a chipped mug she refused to replace. The scent of vanilla oatmeal drifted in from the kitchen. David was humming lowly, somewhere down the hall, off-key but familiar. And in the center of the nursery, Isla stood, wobbly, wide-eyed, hands open like she was trying to catch the air. Her diaper gave her a kind of comic bulk, but it didn't matter. Her feet small, unsure stamped against the rug with a rhythm only she knew. And across from her, not 2 yards away, Luna waited. The dog didn't move. She didn't cock her head or shift her weight. She just watched, as if she'd known this moment was coming long before any of them. Elena lowered her mug slowly, heart stalling somewhere between awe and disbelief. "David," she whispered, not taking her eyes off their daughter. "Come here now." Isla's knees bent, then straightened, her arms pinwheeled in slow, determined arcs. Her face scrunched, like she was solving a riddle no one else could see. One foot, then the other, then a stumble. But she caught herself. Toward Luna. Always toward Luna. David appeared at the doorway, still holding a spoon. He froze when he saw Themha's little girl, stepping into the space between fear and trust. "She's walking," he breathed. "No," Elena corrected softly. "She's choosing." Luna blinked. Not even a tail twitch. She knew her role. Not coach, not distraction. Anchor, still, strong, waiting. The baby closed the gap in a final half-step. Then, like gravity remembering itself, collapsed forward, straight into Luna's chest. A puff of air left the dog's nose. She didn't flinch. Isla giggled, face buried in soft fur. Her tiny hands clutched at Luna's neck with total abandon. The kind of laugh that bubbles from the belly, carefree, boundless. Elena dropped to her knees. Tears fell, uninvited but welcome. David sank beside her, arms sliding around her shoulders. Their daughter, the baby, who once trembled through fever dreams, who cried out for comfort they couldn't always give, had taken her first steps. Not toward a toy, not toward them, but toward trust. And Luna let it happen. Let herself be fallen into. Held the moment without needing to be part of it. That was her gift always had been. They stayed like that a while. No one spoke. Even the house seemed to hush in reverence. Just the rise and fall of breaths. Just the weight of a miracle that didn't need to shout to be heard. Later that night, Elena found the baby monitor blinking. She rewound the feed, watched it all again in silent wonder. She paused it on the frame where Isla's arms reached out mid-step, mid-trust. She saved it, printed it, wrote on the back in pen. Her first steps were into the safest place she knew. Luna, of course, never told anyone. She just curled up in her window seat as the moon climbed over the eaves, watchful, content, and utterly still. Because some victories don't need medals, just footprints in fur, and a child's laughter echoing into forever. The studio was smaller than Elena expected. Not cold, like she feared, just quiet. She sat across from the anchor, legs crossed tightly, fingers laced together in her lap like they were trying to keep her grounded. A single camera blinked its red light. Microphones rested between them like tiny interrogators, waiting to catch every syllable. Behind the glass, producers moved silently, adjusting dials, nodding to cues. And off to the side, curled beneath a table draped in black fabric, Luna. Calm, steady. Her amber eyes never left Elena's side. Elena hadn't wanted this. She'd turned down 3 networks, a podcast, and a human interest blog that had offered free dog treats for a quote. But this one felt different. It was local, honest. And the reporter, a middle-aged woman named Camille, had shown up not with a camera crew or a clipboard, but with a blanket for Luna and a soft voice that said, "We just want to understand." "Ready?" Camille asked. Elena took a slow breath. "As I'll ever be." The light blinked again. They were live. Camille smiled gently. "Thank you for being here, Elena. I know it wasn't an easy..." "Yes." Elena gave a nod, her voice low. "We're not used to attention. Luna, least of all." A soft chuckle. "And yet, here we are, because of her." Camille turned to the camera. "For those just joining us, you may know this story already. A house fire, a baby saved, a dog named Luna who warned a family in time. But what you haven't heard is this family's heart. She looked back at Elena. So, let's begin. Tell us, how did Luna come into your life? Elena smiled, but her eyes shimmered. She wasn't supposed to stay, she began, voice catching slightly. She was a foster. One of those quiet cases that don't get many clicks online. Older, a little too alert, always watching the door. She glanced toward Luna, who was still attentive. But something in her just fit, like she'd been here before, like she knew us. Camille leaned forward. And the night of the fire? Elena swallowed. It started in the wall, they said. Something faulty near the kitchen fuse box. We were asleep. Islor's daughter was in her crib. A pause. And Luna? Luna wouldn't let it go. She barked, paced, scratched at the nursery door. David thought she was restless. I did too. Her eyes clouded with memory. But then she growled. Low, focused. The kind of sound that makes you listen, even if you don't want to. Camille's voice was gentle. And she led you out? She didn't leave Isla's side. Not once. Not even when the hallway started filling with smoke. She waited until David had her in his arms. Then she ran ahead right down the center of the living room, straight to the front door. Elena's lips trembled. She saved us. All of us. Her voice broke. She reached for a tissue someone had kindly left just off camera. Camille gave her space. Then softly, some people say animals just react. That it's instinct, not understanding, not loyalty. Elena lifted her head slowly. She knew. She whispered. And I don't mean in some vague animal way. I mean, she chose. She protected. She waited. She didn't panic. She didn't run. She guarded. She turned to the camera now, her voice firmer. We didn't rescue her. She rescued us again and again, in ways we can't always name, in moments we didn't even see. Silence held for a beat. Even behind the glass, the producers didn't move. Luna shifted slightly, resting her chin on her paws. Her tail didn't wag. It didn't have to. She was where she needed to be. Camille's voice returned, lower now. What would you say to the people watching? To those who've sent in letters, gifts, prayers? Elena blinked away the last of her tears. I'd say thank you for seeing her. Not as a headline, but as someone. She exhaled, shaky but honest. And I'd say look twice. At the ones who seem too quiet, too scarred, too still. Because sometimes the bravest hearts aren't loud. The red light blinked off. The room exhaled. Camille stood first, offering her hand. Elena took it, fingers still trembling. You did good, Camille said. Really good. Elena looked down at Luna. The dog blinked slowly, then rose, padding over to sit beside her without sound. Elena smiled. She's the one who always does good. And with that, they left. No speeches, no fanfare. Just a woman, her daughter's protector, and a quiet kind of grace that didn't need a spotlight to be seen. The wind pressed softly against the windows of the rebuilt house, carrying with it the hum of a quiet town settling into sleep. Streetlights blinked in the distance, one by one, like eyelids surrendering to the dark. Inside, the warmth held steady flickers of lamplight casting long, gentle shadows across the new wood floors. In the corner of the nursery, a new addition gleamed faintly, a sunlit nook by the window, framed in pale birch and wrapped with a view of the stars. The space was small, but deliberate, built not for show, not for people, but for Luna. She rested there now, curled into a crescent of fur and breath, her body half in dream, half on duty. The house slept, but she didn't, not all the way. In the other room, Elena stirred in her sleep, one hand loosely draped over the monitor that picked up the softest whimpers, the smallest cries. David lay on his side, steady breathing matched only by the slow tick of the wall clock. Down the hall, Isla murmured in her crib, not a cry, just a sound like cotton brushing air, the kind babies make when they dream of things too sweet for words. Luna's ear twitched. She didn't move, just listened, waited, watched. She had always been this way. Even when she was younger, faster, sharper, she never rested easy. Not when there were steps outside the door, not when the wind shifted wrong, not when a child cried in another room. Something in her wiring had refused comfort for duty. Not obedience, not training, something older than that, deeper. Like the wolves hadn't entirely left her bloodline, like the wild still whispered, "Protect the pack." Outside, a car passed on the street. Slow, harmless. Tires barely hummed. Luna's eyes opened not wide, just enough. A flicker of gold catching the moonlight. A glance that lasted 2 breaths longer than necessary. Then, closed again. She did this often. Checked, then let go, but never all the way. The window above her nook had a small smudge on the glass eyeless fingerprint from earlier that day. A reach too high, a laugh too loud, a moment of joy Luna had been there to witness. The house was full of these things now, evidence that life had returned. Crayon marks beneath the table, a single pacifier wedged under the couch, a thank you card with paw prints drawn in pink marker pinned to the fridge. They had been given a second chance. Because she still watched. Elena had said it once during the interview, she never stopped protecting. But there was something truer in the way Luna lived than any phrase could hold. She didn't try to protect. She simply was protection. By nature, by choice, by love. And love, for Luna, didn't sleep. A soft click from the baby monitor. Isla shifted again, a sleepy coo. Luna's head rose an inch, eyes open. She didn't stand. No need, just listened. The house was still, safe. She lowered her head again, slowly, deliberately, like a sentry who'd scanned every edge of the forest and found no danger. Her breath evened out, steady, measured. But her ears stayed alert, tilted, tuned. The clock in the hallway struck midnight, a low chime. 12 echoes that rippled through the stillness. Luna didn't flinch. She had heard it before. She would hear it again. Because her watch wasn't measured in hours or minutes. It was measured in presence, in what-ifs, in just-in-cases. She shifted slightly in the nook, paws crossing over one another, tail curling in, the way soldiers do with their rifles when the frost creeps close. And then her eyes opened one more time, just a sliver. She looked toward the hallway, toward the crib, toward the door. Then, satisfied, she let them close again. But not for long. Never for long. Outside, the stars continued their quiet march across the sky. Inside, Luna lay still. Not asleep. Not fully. Just ready. The world may turn. The family may grow. The years may soften her step. But there, in that sunlit nook now bathed in moonlight, one truth would never fade. The house may sleep, but she never truly does. In a world often marked by noise, haste, and forgetfulness, stories like Luna's remind us of the quiet guardians who walk beside you asking for nothing, yet giving everything, through every bark, every watchful gaze, and every unspoken act of loyalty. Dogs like Luna, especially the noble German Shepherd, show us the truest form of devotion. They teach us that love is not loud. It is consistent. It is vigilant. It sacrifices without seeking recognition. This story is more than a tale of fire and rescue. It's a testament to second chances, to unseen heroes, and to the healing power of connection between humans and animals. Luna didn't just save a home. She rebuilt trust, purpose, and hope. May we learn to see animals not as pets, but as souls, as family, as beings who feel, who remember, and who give love unconditionally. And may we carry forward Luna's silent message. Protect those you love. Stand guard, even when no one sees. And never stop believing in the good that still watches over us day and night. Because sometimes, heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes, they simply lie at the foot of a crib, watching, waiting loving.